Herp House Rock, we have another great episode for you today. We have Vin Russo on again for a comeback tour. There's some pretty big tragedy stuff that happened in the industry right now, and so we're going to be talking about a little bit about that, remembering a great guy, but also getting into some more animals and digging into Vin Russo's huge wealth of knowledge. So stay tuned.
Yeah, just like Ben said, thanks for coming on again. Honestly, Vin, we had a great time last time. I'm gonna fanboy again, man. Still one of my favorite breeders there has been in the industry, just from the diversity of your collection and the success you've had. Plus, you just kind of do your own thing and get by every year without getting caught up in anything going on. So I respect that.
Thank you.
But yeah, like we talked a little bit before we got going today, we lost Tom Burke this past week, which was a tough thing. A real legend in the hobby. A real staple in the community, especially in the boa community. And, I'm sure over the years, there's been a bunch of people in the industry that have bought ball pythons from him. He's been pretty heavy in the clown project for a long time. But, yeah, Vin's got a great, Vin's known the guy for a long time. So, I'm going to just stop talking. I want to hear some stuff about Burke, like I said, community-based, just, let's hear the story of Tom.
Well, I met Tom back in when I was in high school, so probably about 1985. Tom was I grew up on Long Island, and Tom lived on Long Island too, and he was the first guy that I met that bred boas, bred them consistently. So he was a super great guy because he let me come to his house and look at his snakes. That's a rare thing. People don't do that now, So as a kid, me and my friend Willie would go to his house and hang out with him and his wife and his kids and look at snakes in his basement. And we became friends. And he came to my facility at one point, my friend's basement, where we were breeding Burmese pythons. And he used to make fun of me and my friend for breeding these giant Burmese pythons because they're so big and they bite and we're nuts, But we were, 16-year-old, 17-year-old kids. And, he was an older guy married with kids. And he was breeding, at that time, he was breeding Brazilian rainbow boas. A lot of people don't know that about Tom. He was breeding them in big numbers. I mean, he was producing well over 100 or maybe even more a season of rainbow boas. And wow. He was wholesaling them out because that's what he did. He was the first guy that I met that commercially bred boas and made money doing it. And that's when the big light bulb went off in my head as a kid. Like, wow, I could do this too. So Tom's my total inspiration for doing what I do today.
Wow.
Yeah, much respect. Tom coming up, like you said, early boa guy. Now I saw you posted a picture with a book a couple days ago. Now he done some writing over the years that maybe I didn't even know about?
No, that was my book, and he wrote like a blurb in the back about me, because he was my friend. So, and I even wrote something about him on the inside. I didn't post that, but I wrote a little blurb about him, similar to what I just told you guys about him, how we had met and became friends, and he was breeding boas, and a lot of firsts happened with Tom. The first, all my locality boa friends, we all know Tom as a morph breeder. But back then, Tom had the very first Pucallpa boas I ever saw, Peru Pucallpa boas I've ever seen in my life. He got them from a missionary who was bringing them in from Peru legally. He had the first Bolivian boas I've ever seen from Joe Terry ever. That was in the again, 86, 87, somewhere around there. First Argentine boas I saw, he had them. So he was, he was an innovator. He got me into that stuff. He really did. And he's definitely responsible for that, little part of my life. And my brother and I had a pet shop at the time, and he would come in all the time to buy mice and rats. And he'd bring his kids with him. The people that have seen him at his table know Amanda and Tom Jr. They were little kids. They couldn't see over the counter when he would bring them in. So they were, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 or 9. I mean, young kids. And he's a great family man. He spent a lot of time with his kids. And I really looked up to him as a young man. He was a great guy.
That's good. And you guys also had the fishing in common. I think you guys had a couple fishing trips now and again over the years.
Oh yeah, Tom had a house in the Keys. He had a boat. He invited me every winter to go down, and I barely had time to ever go. I regret that I didn't go more. And he was just that type of guy. He'd be like, Vin, I'm going. If you're gonna come down to Florida, come see me down in the Keys. We'll go fishing for a couple of days. That's the type of guy he was. And he, a lot of people don't know that Tom was a tugboat captain also. And, Tom's a real salty dog. He really is. And he also had a commercial charter boat for years with his brother. And, a weird coincidence was when I married my wife in 96, my wife has two brothers that are charter boat guys too. And they heard me talking about, I think I heard them talking about Tom Burke. And I'm like, does he breed snakes? And they're like, yeah, you know that guy? I'm like, I've known him forever. That's so, even my brother-in-laws who are in the fishing world knew Tom as a legend. He was a legend there too. And a lot of people don't know that he, up until now, he had a charter boat out of Montauk, a striped bass charter boat that his son Tom was running. So they were still doing it.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Go ahead, Ben.
I was going to ask, with him being around for so long, what kind of stuff in the community did he do? Like, I know that he was big into, helping out and things like that. So what legacy you were talking about before we started this off, was he kind of building up?
Oh yeah, well, again, another coincidence. It's weird. It's like, you meet people in your life for a reason, and Tom and I became friends for a reason, and we had multiple coincidences, and this story will lead up to his legacy today. But Tom and I were really good friends the mid 80s till about 90, early 90s, mid 90s. And he kind of like, I'm not going to say he disappeared, but he kind of got out of snakes for a while. And so I didn't see him at the one picture I posted on my page was the 1990 Reptile Breeders Expo when it was in Orlando. He and I went down there with another couple friends of ours, and he had a table, I had a table. But what I'm getting at is, after that, he kind of stopped breeding snakes. I didn't hear from him for a few years. I don't remember the amount of time. It's a long time ago. But in the year 2000, I had a mortgage company, and it was in Deer Park, Long Island, and Tom's house was in Deer Park. And one day I'm at work, and now keep in mind I hadn't seen Tom in years, and I'm at work and I hear somebody in my office, in the front of my office, talking to my receptionist saying, I need a mortgage. I have horrible credit. So I walk out and it's Tom Burke. He's in my office. I hadn't seen him in years. He's got a leather jacket on. He came in on a Harley Davidson. So he tells me, I just got divorced. I'm looking to buy a house. My credit's not perfect. Everywhere I went, they say I can't help you. I said, I'm going to help you. And I ended up getting him a mortgage for the house that he lived in to this day. But what I'm getting at with boas is I told him I was still breeding boas and I was really into it. And he came to my house and saw all the stuff I had. And he was like, I missed out on a lot in a few years. I'm getting back. So he had bought a bunch of stuff from me, a few things. And he got back into boas. That was 2000. So, and, he was an innovator. He was the type of guy that did, the breedings that you'd never think of. He was the first guy to breed a leopard boa to an albino boa. Mm-hmm. I ended up buying the hets from him, double hets. And he and I both made albino boas the same year. Albino leopard boas the same year. And that was, I think it was 2008. We both made them from the hets that he produced. So, he was responsible for making the very first albino leopard boas. So that was just the beginning. I remember he and I were in Daytona, and Hans Winter had a table of leopard boas, and me and Tom went over there and bought a bunch of them. Each one, Tom's like, I want that one, and I was like, I want that one, and we made a deal with Hans. So we were the first guys to do the leopard thing, but he took it a couple steps further by trying to see what he can make with them, And that was just the beginning, Then he got the T-positive Nicaraguans from Ben Siegel. I think there was 3 of them that he had bought. That was around, I'm going to say, early 2000s. I don't know the exact date, 2002, something like that, maybe 2003. And he eventually raised those up and bred those and mixed them into blood boas. And I remember when he made a T-positive blood boa, he showed it to me, and I'm like, it's not that great yet, And after a couple of sheds, we were like blown away. We're like, wow, that thing is cool, So, I mean, he's always been a step ahead, an innovator, a guy that's trying to make the next best thing. As far as his legacy, I mean, what he left behind is, I mean, you got to see some of the Sunglow leopards he's made. I mean, people have seen them. He would bring them to Daytona and to Tinley Park. The VPI IMG stuff he made blows everybody away. I mean, they look like they're boas with color that's been bleached out of them and color added and black, and they're insane. So I don't know whether or not he was the first guy to make those or not, but he perfected it, So he's left behind quite a legacy for himself, and I'm proud to have known him and been his friend,
Yeah. And, just to kind of, elaborate on that a little bit too. And like you said, there's a lot of things that he left behind. The lipstick line albinos and sunglows were such a big deal in the industry for so long. Like you said, the Burke line T positives. But, and this is a little sappy, but, the reality is, would there be a Vin Russo without him? Even I bought my first real boa constrictor from him. I think it was like 2003. I bought a lipstick albino and paid 3 times as much as any other albino on the market, but it just had to be a lipstick albino to get me started. And that one male really kind of took off everything for what I did in the hobby from there on moving forward. So, other than a me and a you, and, you especially, I'm sure there's a lot of other breeders we have now that are doing amazing things in this hobby based on guys like that.
Tom is definitely responsible for me. I know. I've told him to his face, and I even thanked him in the forward of one of my books. I'm like, if it wasn't for Tom, I definitely wouldn't be the Vin Russo that I am. I might be breeding snakes, but not at the level I am. Definitely not.
No, and that right person for anybody early in the hobby influencing us to go in the direction we're to go in is always huge. And, we don't always have the right guy on our side, but, anybody who had Tom helping them along the way in the beginning, had the potential of doing great things in the hobby. But no, like I said, it's definitely a tragedy. I hated hearing it. Dennis reached out to me, Warren reached out to me around the same time, letting me know. Like I said, it's tough. We all know he was battling for a while there, but even with the battle, we just have a little hope.
Right. Yeah, it is sad, but what we need to do is celebrate what he did. For the industry, for the friendships he's created. I keep saying this. I really did look up to him. I mean, he was a great father. Just a great man, fun, humble. I mean, he was the guy that I looked at as a 16-year-old kid and said, I want to be like that guy. I want to breed snakes and enjoy life and go fishing a lot. So I guess that's why we became good friends.
No, that's awesome. Similar hobbies are always a big deal, and it's always nice to have good fishing buddies, man. Sometimes they're far and in between in this hobby. At least guys that know how to do it right.
You're right. There's a big difference between hobbyists and serious guys. Tom was the most serious fisherman I knew, for sure. I mean, he got me into Advet reels. That's all I use now. So I mean, it's sad that he's gone, but we need to celebrate his legacy and That's what we're doing right now.
No, yeah, for sure. And like I said, I don't want this to be one big sad thing, but I do think that everyone should be paying tribute to a guy like that because, we talk about this too, like the reality in this hobby. Him being a boa guy, it's not like he was this huge, well-known ball python guy. So, there was a smaller part of the community that maybe knew about his history, and a lot of people probably didn't realize how long he was in the hobby.
Right.
That's the awesome thing about, guys like you and a lot of other guys telling the stories is, that guy had 30 plus years in the hobby, more than a lot of other people can say. And, really, like you said, planted the seed to create ideas, going for the double recessive boas early on, saw the potential in the leopards, chased the albinos. Still to this day, I don't exactly know where his original lipsticks came from, but there was always little secrets in the hobby of where the lipstick started and so on and so forth. But yeah, as a boa fanatic, Tom was one of those guys early on that you just paid a lot of attention to.
Yeah. Well, Tom told me the whole lipstick line started with snakes that he got from a guy named Damien, and they were salmon's het albino.
Okay.
And, he says that there's one pair of snakes that he bred that would make that lipstick looking line, and he argued with a lot of people because a lot of people wanted to abuse that name later on by saying these are lipstick line, albino and sunglow boas. And he would say, unless it came from that pair of snakes that you bought babies from me, then they're not lipsticks,
Yeah.
He was adamant about that.
Anyone with a high contrast sunglow out there with a light background and a big bold pattern would always just write lipstick on it. It was easy, and you knew it was going to sell for more money, so it was not uncommon. But I do remember that argument from Burke all the time. If it didn't come from this pair, it's not a lipstick.
Exactly. So I'll keep reiterating that to people as long as I'm alive, so that they know that there's probably a lot of imposters out there.
Yeah. No, I believe it.
Yeah.
But too, like, I know you started doing the blood albino stuff early, but man, that blood albino stuff and some of those adult pictures that still to this day are on the top of your Google search, like some of the neatest boas that have ever been created. Like the color on them with that little bit of yellow background are just absolutely incredible.
Well, I learned that from Tom. I did make the first albino blood, and I learned from Tom to take the chance. Keep this in mind. A lot of people don't realize this. At the time when Tom was breeding a leopard to an albino and I was breeding a blood to an albino, a litter of albino boas was worth a lot of money. Albino boas back then were probably $1,200 a piece or something, So I learned from him, he sacrificed making 15, 20 albino boas to breed a leopard boa to an albino and make 15, 20 double hets that weren't going to probably be as easy to sell as albinos because people don't like buying hets. They really don't like buying normal boas and spending $6-7 grand a pair for them, So the same thing happened with me with the blood boas. I bred a albino to a blood, and I made a whole litter of these normal babies, and to be honest with you, nobody would buy them from me. It was I'm trying to think of the year. It was probably 2007 I did that, and so I ended up keeping them all and bred those double hets to each other, and by 2010 I think, or 11, I made the first albino blood. But what I'm getting at is I learned from Tom to sacrifice that back-ended project. A lot of people want the front-loaded project where they're making stuff right out of the gate, and they're very impatient. But you think about it, it's a long-term project. You've got to raise the parents, then breed them, and then raise their babies in hopes that you make, it's a minimum of 7 years.
Yeah. No, and especially in the ball python community nowadays, like I keep joking around. Next year, if it's not a quad het, no one's gonna want in the project. Like everything every year is just about how many recessives we can build on it, and I really think quad's gonna be the norm next year. And if it's not a quad, everyone's gonna, I don't even know that expression. I'm gonna jump right by that, but Yeah, it's just, in boas, like you said, there was a sure thing there, especially when you didn't have a lot of competition back then, to sacrifice the season on an animal that may only breed every other year for you, and a male that's typically just going to be able to go with one female. That's a huge risk, but that risk, in my opinion, really paid off for Tom, and I know it paid off for you too with the blood albino stuff, and with him with the leopard albino and sunglow stuff. That was a staple with him. Like, people went to him for those animals, and really, I feel like he made more than anybody else in the industry with that project, just in the quantity of animals he produced.
Oh yeah, definitely. And he was also the type of guy who was really good with economics as far as cage space. For Tom, if he wasn't making a lot of money on a pair of snakes, he didn't bother with them. And I learned that from him too. He would, say, if I'm going to have that, this amount of space taken up for all these snakes, they better be making the money for me. So he definitely was an innovator and ahead of his time, and had his finger on the pulse of what was going on, and stayed a couple steps ahead of people, and I'm happy to have known him and learned from him.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. Kind of jumping around a little bit. Like I said, I'm sure we're going to come back and talk a lot of Tom. Like I said, we've talked a little boas, and of course we talked boas of you last time, but we really haven't talked too much about the history of the boa constrictor in the United States. And it's always kind of been neck and neck for a long time there, in my opinion, with boas and ball pythons of popularity until around the early 2000s, where ball pythons started really pulling away. Right. Especially when the Lasiac came up, even guys like me that had a really small collection really got scared. And, I picked 40 ball pythons over my 10 boa constrictors because I didn't want to go out of business when I could only sell within my state lines. I did still keep some boas, but at that time I just was living check to check with my job, and it was just too high risk to stay with them. But the cool thing is, guys like you and guys that stuck through the boas, even through the Lasiac, are doing amazing things, 5 or 6 steps ahead of what anybody thought. Even Tony Antonucci had some really great years. Like you said, the IMGT positive stuff. What he did with the VPI line, get an Aztec and jungle in there those first few years, some of the coolest animals we had seen, and it really, really took boas up a notch. But, to this day, I would have to say in this industry when it comes to constrictors, I'd still like to say boas might be the second most popular. I don't know if retics are pushing. I know there's a lot of them out there, but I'd still like to think that boas are the second most popular constrictor in the industry.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But you know what? Like I said, we love going back and talking history, and, we're already started talking in the 80s and all that. But, I want to hear about some of the early, what you learned about breeding boas early on. I want to hear about the mistakes we learned early on. I know you're set to a real schedule where a lot of people are kind of all over the place with their breeding now. We don't need a total breakdown, but, I'd like to hear about some of the failures early on and, some of the crazy enclosures people were using while they were trying to figure out how to breed a boa.
Well, back in the 80s, there wasn't a lot of guys breeding boas. And, again, we'll go back to Tom. Tom was breeding them regularly. So when I went to his house, I really picked his brain. But one of the mistakes that I was making in the beginning was assuming that the boas needed to be, they needed to be cooled down. Like people had this theory of breeding reptiles that, everything has to be cooled down, like hibernate them, And I learned a long time ago that doesn't work. And another thing that another myth that was around back then was you need to mist them down when you cool them down. If anything, you're just creating a recipe for disaster, because if you mist the boa down when you're cooling it down, you're going to kill it and give it pneumonia, Yeah. So that was one of the myths of the past, cool them, hibernate them, and mist them down. I even went to, I remember going to a herpetological society meeting in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. It was the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania Herpetological Society. And there was a guy who did a little slide presentation on breeding boas and pythons. And this was like, I'm going to say 1987 maybe. And he did exactly that. He cooled everything down and misted them down. And he had some success. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, those snakes sitting on those eggs didn't look so happy. They didn't look so healthy, you know. Those gravid boas looked like they were struggling, you know. I'm like, there's something missing here, you know. And I learned from a few people back then that that's not the case. They still need heat. You know, they live where there's sun. They can go bask and get sun. Yeah, there's rainy season and dry seasons, and it took me a long time to figure out exactly what worked. And Tom was the first guy I remember using timers on his heat tape. Appliance timers. You know, he would have the heat tape turned off at night with the appliance timer and then come back on in the day. He also had these little rheostats that you use for dimming light bulbs to adjust the heat level. Instead of a thermostat, it was this little rheostat. So, you know, that was in the beginning. We were all figuring out how to breed snakes and, you know, how it works. But, you know, having friends like Tom and, you know, a few other people in the industry, we would compare notes with each other. Be like, you know, what did you do this year? How did it work? You know? And, you know, we would meet in Orlando for the National Reptile Breeders Expo, which was the big reptile show. And there was people from all over the country there and all over from other countries too back then. And, you know, that's how we got into figuring out how to breed them regularly. And you know, I traveled and went to these places where they lived and tried to, you know, I would bring thermometers, hygrometers, just to get ideas of what's going on in the weather there, and that helped me out too. So, you know, but the biggest misconception was hibernate them and mist them down.
Man.
Well, yeah, like you said, trial and error in the beginning. You know, we're not all doing it the same way we used to do it, and you know, it's always just finding your own way. And if it works for you, it works for you. You know, and you know, I know you do a lot of seasonal feeding, which we discussed in length last time. I want to talk. I don't know if we did it in that much last time, but I want to talk about the size of your females with age that you're breeding now. You know, you're breeding an animal a lot older than most people would, or a couple years later than most people would start, and about half the size, I find. When did you kind of start going in that direction, and why?
Well, you know, years and years ago, my brother and I, when we had our reptile pet shop back in the late 80s, we would go to a guy. There was a guy in New York City, Alfred Ojeda, Big Apple Reptile. Hmm? Alfred still vends at White Plains. Alfred's a great friend, and he was an importer. He would bring in Guyana. He would bring in Guyana boas. And I remember fishing through his shipment of Guyana boas and picking out these little tiny, maybe 4-foot females that were gravid. And they were Guyana boas. They were maybe, you know, they weren't that thick. They were maybe that thick. And picking out what looked like gravid snakes and setting them up, and they would have babies eventually. They would only have 4 or 5, but they would have babies eventually. And I remember at that time realizing that these snakes don't have to be giant to reproduce. I'm sure it's got to be age and muscle mass. So that was in the 80s. I already had it in the back of my head that these snakes didn't have to be monsters, you know, and I took it from there. So, and as time went on, I realized that the big giant clunkers didn't do well at all, you know, because again, owning a reptile shop, people would give you their snakes for free all the time. Every day, somebody would come in. I mean, multiple times there'd be a guy with a big boa and a duffel bag, and they'd say, "Just ate my wife's parrot. I have to get rid of it," you know. So you'd get these big clunker boas, and you'd set them up for breeding, and you'd do everything you thought was right, and you'd get nothing out of them, nothing. So I realized that the snakes that I raised up myself and fed, a very seasonal diet, and took my time raising them up, were my best breeders. So I just, at that point, I made a vow never to take in adult snakes again to breed, and only raise my own. And I preach that to everybody.
Well, And the reality is too, the bigger the fatter the boa is not a better thing. Yeah, the reality is you can get a bigger litter, but the longevity with the animal is just not there. And I'm not sure about you, but if we lose a big boa constrictor, we're always going to open it up and take a look. And we're in heavy breeding right now, and we lost one of our big IMG girls. And after opening her up, like her heart was just like surrounded by fat. Like you could tell that's what killed her when everything was said and done. But like I said, people back in the day got them really big. I'm with you now. We have quite a few holdback females, and we're really taking our sweet old time to get them there. A lot of these girls are pushing 4 years old, and we're probably not even going to breed them until next year at the earliest. But the downside, smaller litters, but the upside is longevity with an animal, and getting 5 or 10 or 15 years out of an animal compared to 3. It just seems silly. Plus, the reality is, it's just inhumane. Obesity in any animal is not good. Nobody goes over to your buddy's house and sees his overweight dog and says, "Oh, that's the cutest thing I've ever seen." Like, you feel bad for the animal.
Yeah, well, being in the in the industry of seeing these imports coming in all those years, I can honestly say I never saw a fat snake come out of the wild, and even the gravid ones were heavy in the bottom half of their bodies.
Yeah.
The other half of their bodies weren't really fat. So, I learned just from seeing the wild caught animals, and also from going to the countries where this stuff came from and seeing them in nature, and understanding that these snakes eat very seasonally, regardless of what you think. It's definitely feast or famine. And there's a time of year, specifically in the Amazon basin and in South America, there's a time of year where there is a feast, and there's a time of year where there is a famine, and sometimes that famine lasts longer than anticipated because of weather cycles. You hear of people that live in South Texas that say, "Oh, it hasn't rained in 2 years." In some places, or it's significantly rained in 2 years. That happens down in South America, in the Pantanal. It might not rain. The seasonal rains may not come for another 2 months, and maybe they might not come at all. Who knows? So there's times of years when you'll see anacondas that are painfully thin because they haven't eaten. The rains didn't come, and there isn't an abundance of food yet. But then when the rains do come and there is an abundance of food, those female anacondas are going to gorge themselves. There's going to be caimans in the water. There's going to be waterfowl. There's going to be capybaras. They're going to eat as much as they can. And it's that influx of food that sets them into egg development.
Oh, very true. And, I know you've talked about this a lot, and I know that's one big thing that Tracy pushes, just, seasonal feeding, getting them to cycle that way, not so much adjusting your temperatures too much. Like I said, the reality is there's probably 20 different ways to breed a boa. Whatever works for you, keep doing it. I mean, I have my methods, and I don't want to change them too much, but like I said, the size of the animal is one big thing that we've been changing our collection over the last 3-4 years. Like I said, the only big boas we have left are ones that probably came in from somebody else.
Right.
But yeah, so the pet store days, and boas, man, it seems like a lot of mutations have gone through the pet trade just in pet stores, and I know that happened for you one time with the Russo Red line of pastel that you work with. That was just a random guy that came in with a boa and a sack one time, right?
Yeah, just a normal Colombian boa that he probably bought at a pet store, and it just was a nice red one, and was going away to college, and he had to get rid of it, and so I ended up getting it, and that's made a lot of cool stuff for me,
Oh, yeah. I know I've picked up a couple animals from that project from you over the years, and I know whenever I see you at Tinley, those animals are always popping on your table, usually some of the brighter ones you got. So I know you keep a lot of things purity. Have you done any Russo Red into some of your mixed blood projects?
Yeah, I've mixed the Russo Red into the Sterling boa. I made the Sterlings really nice red ones. They're hypo and Russo Red and Sterling. So I've also mixed it into. I bred a Russo Red to a Barranquilla boa, which is a Colombian, same Colombian. It's pretty much the same bloodline, and those turned out really good. I mean, because the Barranquilla Colombians have a lot of orange in them, and the mix of that orange with that Russo Red trait made a really, really red, burnt orange snake. It's pretty cool. So I've done that. One guy recently asked me if I mixed them into blood boas. To me, that's a waste of time. You're just adding size into a smaller dwarf race, which to me is a waste, because the pure Colombian stuff gets bigger no matter which way you turn it. I mean, they're Colombian boas, they're bigger snakes. So I try to only keep them with the Colombian races. I'm not going to mix them into my Central American stuff. That's counterproductive, and it goes against what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep everything smaller. All the pure blood boa stuff I have that doesn't have albino in it are small snakes. They're in CB70 trays or boa tubs. They're a smaller race of boa. Last year I had some of them breeding in 28 core Rubbermaids and having babies, having 7, 8, 10 babies in the 28 core Rubbermaid.
Wow.
I like the smaller boas. To me, Eugene Bissett uses this term. He knows I'm a bonsai artist. I work on the trees, but he calls them bonsai, even though it's pronouncing it wrong. But he says I'm bonsaiing boas. And I am. I'm keeping the small races small. Simply crossbreed.
And it seems like there's, a lot of people too, like, especially people transitioning over from ball pythons to boas that want that animal to go in their CB70s that they already own.
Right.
So I do find that there are a lot of ball python guys that when they start talking boas, you hear a lot of them talking about the dwarf stuff. And I already made the comment last time, if I'm ever at a show or talking to anybody online, and anybody asks me about any locality, I always send them to you because you got pure stuff and people should know to go to you to buy that stuff when they need it. But what I was talking now, you got to refresh my memory on this. This is something I haven't heard come up in conversation in a long time, but was it Honduran fire bellies at one point? Were pretty common in the mid-2000s, like 2005. I remember hearing a lot about them, but I don't feel like I've heard anything about them in a long time.
Well, the Honduran, you got to keep in mind, Honduras, the country of Honduras, was open to export. Let's see. My brother worked for a fish wholesaler. Let's see what year that was. Probably I'm going to say 90, early 90s. Early to mid 90s, my brother worked for a fish wholesaler in New Jersey. And they were bringing in shipments of reptiles too, because that's how it all happened in the 80s and early 90s. The fish wholesalers would bring in, they'd have all the contacts in Central and South America. They'd bring in fish, and sometimes they'd bring in reptiles too to make some more money because they knew the pet trade was booming. And I remember seeing shipments of those Honduran boas coming in we're going to say early to mid 90s. And some of them were really colorful. They had a lot of color on them. And, there was there was one story that maybe Tom Crutchfield brought in, the first Rutan, which is an island off of Honduras, the first Rutan boas. And there's some mystical or mystery about how they may have been, the fire bellies may have been from Rutan. But I remember seeing those Honduran shipments come in, and there were snakes there with really, really red bellies, really orange, burnt orange, red bellies. But you got to keep in mind that Honduras shut down to export shortly after that, so they weren't coming out of the wild. And a few guys who got them and tried to eventually breed them, started marketing them as Honduran, fire belly boas or Rutan fire belly boas. I put them in my first book. I don't think I put them in my second book because they've pretty much almost lost the culture right now. I haven't seen any. I had some myself, but there was a lot of question marks as to where they came from, so I didn't bother. A lot of the stuff I have has provenance to very particular places, and once snakes get out of somebody's hand once or twice, and then it's like you're hearing stories about like what we're talking about right now. Then you don't know. But I don't know of anybody that has those right now.
Well, and I will say that is unfortunate, and that's the one thing that stinks about this hobby sometimes is things like that can get lost. If the wrong person's not still working with something, or somebody just don't think it's worth their time anymore, they move on, and that happens in ball python mutations. That happens in all species across the board.
Oh, definitely.
But no, it's unfortunate. Like I said, I think it was me and Mac Robinette were chatting about that one the other day because, as you know, Mac's been buying a lot more into dwarf boas these last year or so.
Yeah.
Well, good to know. Hey Ben, I'm doing a lot of talking today. Plus, just to let you know, my screen is paused again or frozen. So when we're on too long, you gotta let me know. And if you're raising your hand, I'm not gonna see you. You're gonna have to make a grunting sound this time.
Okay. I do have a few things that I want to talk about, but it's a new topic, and Ryan's on, and Ryan can talk too.
Yep.
I'm just trying to catch up, guys. I apologize for showing up late.
Oh, you're okay, bud. No, we're gonna just kind of jump around. That's the best thing about Vin. He knows a little bit about everything, so I feel like we can get in any topic we want right now. Well, what were you thinking, Ben? Take us in a new direction.
A new direction? It's not a boa direction, though.
Oh, I can bring us back to boas at any point, man. I've got a lot of boa questions left in me for later.
All right, fine. Vin, so since the last time we were talking, this has been on my mind, and I got to ask it. Can you go through the 101 on how to breed Indonesian skinks? Blue tongue?
I already did that. Next subject.
Because nobody knows how to do it, and you blew my socks off. You said, "Oh, I was breeding them, all the time back in the day," and I'm like, "What?"
Well, let's be more specific. Which Indonesian skinks? Because I breed the Irian Jaya, which are the evanescens.
Yeah.
And those have been in captivity. My particular line has been in captivity for over 20 years. That bloodline, maybe even more, maybe 25 years. I think in the mid 90s, they were coming in regularly. Mm-hmm. Back then, they didn't even know what they were. They were just like these nice orange and some gray banded. They look like northern blue tongue skinks, but they were Irian Jayas. Those are the ones that I breed regularly. And I treat them no differently than I do my northerns. But if you're talking about the stuff like the Maruk and the Gigas, or something. Yeah, the Halmaharas.
Nobody's having, and not nobody. They're tough to breed, from what I understand. We haven't tried to breed them ourselves, but when you said that you're working with, I believe you did say Irian Jayas last time, and I just still am surprised, I guess.
Well, the Gigas and the Maruki, for me, I bred those once each. And the time that I did breed them was, I guess it was 2014 or maybe earlier. A friend of mine was on a skink forum and said, Vin, people are breeding those Marukis now. And it was the fall. It was like November. I'm like, why would you breed something in November? It makes no sense whatsoever. So I put mine together and they bred. So they were on a totally different schedule. They're on a totally different, playing field as all the other skinks. And I think what happens with them is, since they come from a very tropical place, there's not much deviation in temperature, and they're close to the equator. I think what happens with those creatures is that it's humidity and slight temperature changes, meaning the lack of, which in November you start having less humidity in your facility because your heat is going to come on. It's not the summer anymore. You don't have the windows and the doors open, and you're not 80-90% humidity in the building anymore. You're drier. You're 30-40% humidity. So I think the lack of humidity gives them a chance of, hey, maybe it's time to breed. Since you don't really give them a break because they don't need one because they're going to be gravid at that point, you keep them still a hot spot warm, and you keep feeding them if they're going to feed, and hope that they give you good babies in 120 days. So that's how I bred those. And in the summer, I kept them hot and humid. I would put them on cypress mulch and let them get something you'd never do with a northern blue tongue skink. Let them get humidity on the sides of their enclosures and misting them down. And keeping them literally hot and feeding them a lot. And they liked bugs more than my northerns do, so I would give them more bugs. You got to read them. I mean, I'm not gonna say that. Oh, I figured it out. I didn't. Some people have to take it a further step than what I did, but what I just gave you should be skink gold.
No, I won't disagree with that. I think out of everyone that we were talking about, like, just again, the reality is, there were a lot more guys doing it years ago than there were now, and actually there are a lot more breeders now, but we're kind of just uneducated. I hate to say it. Like, a lot of us are still figuring out as we go, even ones that have been doing it for a while. And like you said, paying attention to the animals and where they come from goes a long way with any species you work with, being successful with them. But, talking about the Halmahara especially, Steve Russos got a T positive in years ago, and I know that animal's still in circulation. We see a boatload of xanthics come in the country every single year. But other than what comes in, reality is, Halmaharas especially, I've never seen anybody do anything with them in the United States when it came to breeding.
Well, that's your answer. When animals still come into the country inexpensively and they're easy to obtain, nobody bothers trying to breed them.
Yeah.
It's like viper boas. Nobody tried to breed them for years. For years, nobody cared. And then when they disappeared, all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, I got to have viper boas. And then I bred them a few times, and people are like, how'd you do it? Like it's a miracle. It's not. It's all seasonality. It really is. It's the same with the skinks. So when Indonesia shuts down to export, which will happen eventually, I mean, it's going to happen. Then people will learn how to breed the Halmahera skinks, the axanthic ones and the T positive ones and the hypo ones. Until then, they don't have to if they can get them for $125 from Bushmaster or from Underground.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you're definitely right about that. Even like the green anaconda craze in the United States right now, those were just a couple $100 a few years ago, it felt like. And now everybody's marketing them for $800, then it was $1,200, then it's $1,500. Now all of a sudden everybody wants to breed them because there's a value there.
Well, yeah. I mean, the only problem is some states you can't have them. It's just like the retics too. They get big. But yeah, I mean, hey, it's no different with the pure true red tails, those Pacalpa boas, the Pokegron Surinams, the Brazil boas. All that stuff has gone up hundreds of percent in price, hundreds of percent. I mean, those used to be $250, $350, $400. Now they're $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 each.
Yeah.
So that's because they don't come out of the wild anymore. You're never going to see a Pacalpa boa come out of the wild again. I really don't think so. If you do, it might be one litter comes in once every 5 years, which is nothing. Pokegron Suriname, you'll never see that come out of the wild again, ever. You'll never find a true Brazil red tail ever again come out of the wild. Brazil's been shut to CITES since 1985. So there's certain things that you just can't get anymore, which is good and it's bad. It's good because it creates
a demand.
A demand and a reason to breed them to proliferate their race. I mean, to keep them going. It's like if you stop breeding them, then they don't exist.
Yeah, no, and too, like with boas, as unique as the morphs are, the localities are all just so very different from each other, and some way more extreme than others. With your niche, a big part of it being, focusing on these localities, like, still a lot of fun. I even remember back when Rich Eiley brought in, and I can't say if he was the first one, but the Saboge. I thought those are the coolest things ever, like almost completely patternless. I really love the color tone to them. I was pretty obsessed with those for a while, and they never really caught on, unfortunately. And even now, do you have any of the Saboge stock?
I do, and the demand is astronomically high.
Yeah. Well,
You
it
can't make
should be.
enough of those. Are you kidding me? And the
Oh,
price went up tenfold on them. I used to get 500 a pair. Now I get 1,000, 2,000 a pair.
yeah. I remember that with Rich. I mean, Rich came in really high early on, and then I think like 2 years later, they were really low all of a sudden.
Well, what happened was they started coming out of the wild regularly. And you know when that happened? I don't know if you guys, you probably did. Did you ever watch the TV show Survivor?
Yeah.
They had a whole episode or a year of it in Panama, and they were in islands near Saboga Island. And since there was so much production of the show there, it grew attention to the place, and a couple of people got an idea. Let's bring some snakes back. Let's get some permits and bring them back. So a few small shipments of those came in. I was fortunate enough that my friend Quetzal Dwyer, who's got a zoo down in Costa Rica, Reptilandia, he went and got permits from Panama to get I think 10 or 20 of them, and he brought them back, and I got a bunch from him. So. That's where mine came from. And the reason why I wanted those is because he went and got them himself on the island. All the other ones could have came from scattering different spatterings of islands. We don't know. They all look real similar on those islands. If anything, they look almost identical. But I wanted ones from Saboga. And that was the island in which they were described by Doris Cochran in like the 50s. So that's what I wanted. And I have them. And there's a big demand for them. A big demand.
Yeah. Like I said, you never really know when something's going to take off. And, there's a lot of people in the hobby that, stick it out with certain things, and then their day finally comes, whether it's a mutation or a species. We even talked about the clubrid market last time, just how that's exploded in the last few years.
Pine snakes. I can't believe it.
Random. And even like, Hondurans, I felt went down in popularity now are really coming back with popularity. Even I went out and got a few Hondurans.
Yeah. Who doesn't want them?
Yeah, right. So no, like I said, there's some of those nostalgia animals. Like even now, I'm obsessing a little bit over garters. There's just so much going on with them right now. Even though guys overseas have really taken those projects to the next level. I want a couple garter snakes around just because who didn't grow up catching garter snakes? Like that's probably everyone's first snake they caught as a kid.
Yeah.
So eventually I'll get a couple of the right ones, but yeah, it's by the way, Ben and them, remember, if you have anything to say I can't see you got to grunt. Just loud grunts and I'll stop talking. And I'll reset my phone in a second. But keep on boas, and I know we might discuss these guys a little bit. What the heck happened to all the cloud boas?
You mean the clouded boa, nebulosus?
Yes.
Well, there was never really a lot of them to begin with. So
all right. They were in a lot of the early boa books, I felt. Like if you walked into a pet store and bought some of those early editions, I felt like they always had a picture of one of those in there. I felt like I saw a lot of them again when I first got in the hobby in the early 2000s. And I'm not sure, is that something that you have laying around, or is that something you're not even a part of?
I've never had them, and probably never will, because you just can't get them unless you go there and go and pick them up yourself to Dominica, the island of Dominica. A couple of friends of mine, I know a lot of academics and a lot of zoo people and people that are, on the other side of this business. We're going to say pet trade because we breed for the pet industry, but there's guys that are in it for, education and for science and for zoos. And a couple of guys I know went there to Dominica and photographed the snakes and found them and talked to some people there that had the ability to see if permits could be obtained, which they maybe could. It was speculated that you probably could, if you worked on it, you could get some permits to get them out. But here's the thing. They're a cool looking snake. They're not anything to write home about as far as color and pattern. They're pretty drab brown colored snakes. I don't know if there'd be a giant demand for them if you did breed them, other than locality collectors might want them. I think the hardest part would be the logistics of getting them here. Getting the CITES from that small little island nation and getting them here. Can it be done? It might be able to be done. People have asked me if I wanted to do it. Go with them and, talk to the authorities there and get permits, then have them shipped to the U.S. I don't think it's worth it because I don't know if there'd be a big demand as far as the pet industry. There's not a lot of color. You know, we talk about all the stuff that you know, guys like Tom created. It's bleeding with color. There's just so many other things that you can get. I don't believe in going to a place and collecting the wild caught stuff to bring here when there's not a huge demand for it. I personally think they're better off where they are and just leave them there. So,
Oh, it's fine. I remember some of the early day pictures I saw. I thought there was some really nice grays and almost like lighter blues kind of coming through with the grays. And you're right. I know a lot of them always been on the ugly side, but I don't know what it is about those guys. But out of all the boas I saw locality wise growing up, like that was always one that stuck out to me. And apparently I got shitty taste. But yeah, I don't know. Something about them. I just always think about them.
We were talking about the olden days in the 80s with the couple of guys that were breeding boas. There was a guy named Terry Vandevanner, who's still around. I don't know if he's breeding snakes. From what I gather, I think he's really into making knives. You know, hammering knives out of a forge. But he was a really good boa breeder in the 80s, and he and my brother and I would talk via snail mail. That's all we had back then. And I know that he went and got those boas and brought them back, the nebulosas, brought them back to the U.S. and he had a litter of babies from them. Now I think maybe one or two of them was grabbing when he brought them back, so I'm not positive as to what was in the industry came from those captive breedings or the wild caught females that were grabbing. But the babies that you did see, or the young ones that you did see around, like I saw one at White Plains once, years ago. Guy had one on his table, and I think he wanted like $2,000 or $3,000 for it, some crazy price. But for me, one was, what am I going to do with one? I'll never find another one. So I'm pretty sure all those animals that you saw, well, the small number of those that you did see floating around came from Terry Vandevander's efforts, which probably happened somewhere in the late 80s, I'd say. And then maybe he sold, some people bought them and bred them. I don't know. I didn't really follow them that much. I do have a chapter of them in my book, but all the photos are from guys that I knew who went there and took pictures of them.
Okay. So Ben, I'm gonna put you on the spot, or Ryan. So I'm gonna duck out and duck back in so I can get like seeing what the heck's going on. And Ben, I'm gonna send you a couple of pictures I'm gonna want to talk about in a few minutes so you can bring them up with them. But you guys do your thing for like 2 seconds. I'll be right back. You got this.
Can you handle it?
I think we can handle it. Ryan's got this.
I know
I
know nothing about boas, and I wish I knew more. And I'm really into the idea of keeping these dwarf locality specific kind of boas, not chasing after morphs. Really, I don't know if we touched on it yet because I showed up late. But like, could you give me a 101 on how to keep them and how to best maybe even get a litter of babies out of them?
No.
That's not
Fair enough.
No, I can't.
Didn't always says just read his book.
I
just read the chapter on breeding.
I just bought it. I was like, I don't have it, so yeah, went on Amazon 2 seconds ago and did it.
Well, the cool thing about those smaller race boas is you know they don't need a lot of space. So you know, the smallest ones that I keep are the Croquets, the Tarahumara mountain boas. The Cape Hawkers are small too. They're all a smaller race of snake. They do eat seasonally. You know, I feed them like a skink. You know, skinks you feed in the summer and you don't feed in the winter. I don't feed my island type boas in the winter at all. I mean, I don't feed them anything. So as far as breeding them, they need a few more years to mature than most snakes, in my opinion. I give them 4 or 5 years to mature. You know, you guys are breeding ball pythons. They breed pretty quick, 2 or 3 years, and you can breed them. But the boas, you got to wait a little longer. There's a little more discipline in it. But they're pretty easy. I mean, you could keep them in the CV70 trays that you keep the balls in, no problem. I mean, I've done it. Mm-hmm. So I've even done it in 28 quart Rubbermaids. So And as far as, giving you a tutorial on breeding them, I tell people all the same thing. Breeding snakes is more of a discipline and an art form than it is a recipe. There are certain recipes involved, but breeding snakes in my facility is probably much different than breeding them in yours.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever tried out like UVB and like that whole lighting thing with boas?
I've never used UVB on boas ever. And I've got some boas that have had a really long time. So I can honestly say that, is it necessary? I don't know. I mean, I can't say, oh, they have to have it or they don't have to have it. I don't use it. So I don't, I don't feel that it's necessary. Boas are they do bask in the sun, obviously, but they also live in the jungle where it could be dark at times too. That was another misconception that people did too. Back in the early 80s, they would say, "Oh, you got to keep them in the dark in the winter," and keep them cool them down and keep them in the dark and mist them down. So, all things that I don't do at all now.
Yeah. Oh, Dave popped in and then popped back out. Yeah. So if I can ask you maybe a little bit of a question, do you find a lot of really young people trying to get into boas, hey, I'm going to start and get into boas? Do you find it more younger people or more older people?
I was just talking about this the other day with my wife. You know what I found, which is pretty cool, that is a lot of them are girls, women.
Yeah.
Are getting into the smaller races of boas. A lot of the customers I have, a lot of the inquiries I get are younger women that want to get into boas. So, younger people are getting into them, and I think it's great if girls will get into breeding boas. I know there's a bunch of, I meet them at shows at Tinley Park and in Daytona. There are a bunch of young ladies that are getting into breeding boas, which is, to me, is great. I mean, we need more diversification, and women have a more gentler hand on snakes than men. Men are a little rough, So, and it's definitely true. I mean, you could pick up a snake, and if they could feel that rough, trying to hold on to it and manhandle it, the snakes get pissed and they'll bite you. But women, they're more gentler with them, so they do better. That's my opinion.
So I don't know what I missed, but I'm assuming Ben asked the question about women while I was gone, because that just feels like a Ben move.
No, he asked me if young people were getting into snakes and locality boas and boas. I said the odd thing is that a lot of young people, but most of them, a large percentage of them are women and young ladies. So
okay, just making sure he wasn't being too creepy over there.
He wasn't being sexist in any way.
Not this time he wasn't.
Yeah, that's right. You'll have your time.
Yeah.
You guys can keep going. I don't want to hijack it again. I know I'm the boa guy, so I'm going to talk over you two, but
you should, because you know the questions to ask. I'm absorbing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay, so here's the next topic I want to talk about. I want to talk about the reason why some mutations that pop up in pure localities are successful and why some mutations that pop up are not. Now, we've noticed with Central Americans over the years, a majority of those have been very popular. Of course, the Honduran T positive right now is a huge deal. I feel a lot of people are getting into that project and keeping it pure. Anerythristic lines, the Motley line for the Central American, but there's been a few animals, and I sent him a couple pictures. The second series of pictures I sent you was of these pure Guyanas that popped up on the East Coast years ago. They had these really beautiful purple face, and there was a super form they produced that looked like the old school candy cane boa.
Yeah.
You probably remember that. But those animals were up on king snake. No, that's not it. That's not it. Yeah, don't ruin surprises, buddy. Plus, I don't know if he knows Chad. So that was the single gene form, and it's a lot like your Roswell project, your Key West. It was a letterback single tail. And I hate that I don't have a better picture, but the next one where it's actually holding onto a rodent, now that was the super form. And if you could zoom in a little bit, because it was a really cool looking animal. And again, it looked a lot like our super Roswell stuff we were seeing, but it was pure Guyana.
Right.
I remember talking to Jeff Ronnie about those because I looked at them for 6 months and nobody was buying them. And, one thing that Jeff said is a lot of the purists just don't want to go after the morphs. What is it? Like, why do certain mutations take off within these, but other ones just go stagnant? And that might not even exist anymore for all we know.
Well, I'll tell you my opinion is all those snakes that you're talking about, the Roswells and that particular snake, they're all the same trait. They have the connected saddles in the recessive form, even though it's incomplete dominant. And then the dominant form, they have the stripes. They're all the same, pretty much the same trait. I think why locality guys would stay away from that is because there's too much room to take that animal and morph it out and breed it into other things. So, for example, the first Roswells were a Guyana or Suriname crossed with a Colombian, correct? I mean,
yeah,
I'm not positive about this.
Yeah, it was a Suriname's Colombian cross. I forgot the lady's name that did it, but she had bred them together and made the super form.
I have it documented in my book. So, so those first ones already were crossed and, made into, crosses. So, but what's appealing to me is if later on somebody does have a pure line, maybe, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate, maybe there's going to always be a question mark that since it is a morph, maybe Colombians were mixed in there somewhere down the line. Who knows? But I personally, if I knew somebody who had pure Guyana or Surinames that had that funky striping in them, and then they made those really lineated ones, I would get into something like that. That's for sure.
Maybe Jeff remembers who has it, but again, we're talking 2005 range, maybe 2010 is when I saw him on King Snake, and they sat there for a long time. And I wish I had a better picture of the super form, but again, it was a super Roswell type animal, but he was saying it was a pure Guyana. So, like I said, I just thought that'd be something that somebody interested in. And I hear what you're saying about, worrying about it's going to get crossed out, or maybe what you're getting in could be crossed. But, little willpower comes into effect on that. What you do with your collection is what you do with it, and people are going to take it in the direction they want. But, yeah. So here's a question for you, and this is something that I've brought up to a couple people. In your opinion, is there truly a pure Colombian out there, or is every Colombian on the market a mutt at one point or another? And the only reason I say that is I remember Jeff Ronnie had pure hypo Colombians back in the day. But every other hypo lineage I've always understood came from Panamania was mixed in, or I'm not really sure the orange tail stuff came from. Like, is there a true Colombian based on the fact that, whether your animal's hypo or not, it could have had a hypo put into it at one point or another?
Well, it's my opinion that all the hypos came from Central America. Rich Eiley's first one was the salmon was a Panamanian hypo. Jeff G's orange tail hypos were the same thing. They were Panamanian, and he bred them for he kept his pure Panamanian, but later on people mixed them into other things. Rich Eiley right out of the gate bred his first hypo looking Panamanian, or it could have been Nicaraguan. We don't know. It was Central American. And he bred it into Colombians right out of the gate. So that those incomplete dominant hypo traits originated from Central America. As far as a pure Colombian, I personally don't know of a pure Colombian hypo. I have 2 Colombian lines now that are pure Colombian. I have the Coops pastels, which originated from Silvio Coops in Europe, and I have the Barranquilla Colombian boas, which originated from my friend Gus Renfro, who kept some pure lines pure from old school Colombians that he had. So those are Colombian boas. They're Colombian Imperator, Boa Imperator. They don't make any hypos for me. You know, they just make carbon copies of themselves. And they're the old school Colombian boas that we saw when I was a kid, coming into pet stores, you know, by the droves. And later on, again, is my opinion, but later on, I think they depleted them out of certain places. So much so that they had to start going to other places. And, you know, they had these Colombian farms. I use the quotes, farms. And I say that because in Colombia, they were, you know, getting grabber boas, taking the babies and sending them to the United States. I think what happened was when they saw there was a demand for it, they started collecting boas and keeping them at these farms. Now, whether these farms were outdoor or indoor, I don't know. I've never seen one. But I think by doing that, they were taking snakes from all different localities amongst, you know, in Colombia, and just creating this hodgepodge. So the snakes you started seeing coming out of Colombia, like in the, I'm going to say the mid-90s, were very different from the ones I saw when I was a kid in the 80s. So, you know, there's very few of them still around. In the Barranquilla line that I have and the Coops Pastel line I have, I've kept pretty much pure, other than breeding a Barranquilla with a Russo Red. But it was an original Russo Red. It was all Colombian anyway. So they're all Imperator from Colombia. And I think there's probably only a few lines of real true Colombian boas left. You know, they're all mixed into things now, which is fine, you know.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Like I said, I was just having the discussion because, you know, it's kind of a hot topic with some people about, you know, purity this, purity that, dwarf boas. Like you said, that's a big thing for you, you know, not crossing that stuff out. So we're going to jump back on that morph thing, but I want to talk about one other morph that Snake Keeper produced pure T negative Nicaraguans a few years ago. Is that something you've heard about?
No.
Okay, well then we're not even going to talk about that because I don't want to start rumors, but I'm pretty sure that Snake Keeper might have produced some pure T negative Nicaraguans a few years ago, and I think it was like 4 years ago, I want to say. I don't think they've really gone public with it, but I think it's something they put on one of their business pages for Facebook, I noticed. But, you know, with something like that out there, you know, someone for you who likes keeping things small and pure, you know, you have an opportunity to complete blood boas over again with the albinos.
Right.
And again, keep them in your CB70s if that's the case.
Exactly. That would be great. But you got to keep this in mind. It makes you think too. It's like, what are the chances of T negative albinos popping up in pure Nicaraguan stuff? It's like the chances aren't very good. And then again, a lot of people have mixed and matched breedings. So again, I know Dan and Colette well, and they have a lot of very good record keeping. And I'm hoping that could be the fact. I'll give you one example. Years ago, a woman came up to me in Daytona, and she had bought a pair of Sabagay, the Pearl Island boas, from some guy in California. And she came to my table because she wanted to see mine, and she thought they were beautiful, and she really wanted them. And she's like, you know, I bred my, you know, California-based Sabagay, and they had albinos in litter. Could you believe that? I said, well, they had albinos in their litter because I know Rich Eiley bred a Sabagay to a Sunglow boa at one point, made, you know, hets, and they must have got mixed into the population, and somebody must have unscrupulously sold them as pure Sabagay, which you probably could get away with because they probably did look like them. And they did. I saw the picture of the parents. They were close, not anything like what I had, but they were close. And I said, so you most likely got, you know, maybe 2 generations down the road, but the albino gene was still in there, and you produced albinos. And she was, you know, she was a little upset at it, and she ended up buying a pair of pure ones from me. But what I'm getting at is, you know, that anything could happen. You know, that trait could be floating around, and it could pop up 4, 5, 6 generations later, you know.
Okay, understandable.
But I hope they really do have pure T-negative albino Nicaraguans. That would be
I'm
great.
gonna double check, and if you have a relationship with them, I mean, honestly, I've seen them at the shows and chatted tri-stripe projects with them in the past, but never had really crazy boa conversations. I'm gonna do some digging. I like that there's things that I know that you don't know, and I know everything's morph related, but I'm still enjoying this.
Right.
So, last thing I want to talk about localities and mutations popping up. Now, Ben, I sent you 2 other pictures of darker boas, one by itself and one side by side. Can you start with the side by side one? Yeah, again, whoever listens to us not on YouTube, you are not getting the full effect. So pure Suriname boa constrictors. There's a gentleman, and I'm not going to throw names out there, down in Charlotte, North Carolina, that I've spoke to over the years. And at one of the shows, he had showed me this picture and sent it to me after the show. And he was talking about how these had popped up in a pairing he did. And I looked the parents over, thinking there'd be something about it, some kind of connecting pattern. And they were so completely different from each other, it wasn't even funny. And the reason I'm bringing these guys up, one other picture popped up on my Facebook feed the other day, and I have one single picture, if you don't mind bringing that one up. And you're going to have to zoom in crazy on that one. So I don't know how well you can see that. I'm working on a phone. I'm sure, Vin, you're on your computer. But that animal had popped up, and I believe it was produced this past year in 2020. And again, it came out of a Suriname litter. Now, I haven't had time to do any research on this to see if it's the same breeder, if there's just a crazy chance that maybe it popped up twice. But looking at a thing like that, if lineage could be proven, do you think there would be a drive for a mutation like that within a Suriname community?
There might be. The only problem is there's not much color on it. You know?
Yeah.
There's one thing I learned from guys like Tom is color is what people really want.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely something going on. It's definitely a mutation. It's an anomaly that's popped up. And, I think the next step is what do you get when you breed those to each other?
Yeah.
Why is all the color gone? What happened to the color? Because Surinames are dripping in color,
Yeah. Kind of went a different direction compared to some other things we've seen in the series over the years.
It also could be like the trait that's in Sterling, that patternless trait. That's popped up in Longicauda and it's popped up in Imperator, and it could be what it looks like in Constrictor,
Yeah. And you probably remember the first patternless boas that popped up down in North Carolina. I think the gentleman's name was Brandon, if I remember right, but he had a picture of a patternless boa sitting on his pool table on a rack of balls. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, he ended up losing some of those. And I think there was some discussion on whether or not that might have been a Partho litter. I believe Jeff Ronnie did get that female years ago, and I'm not sure if he's been able to do anything with it since. But, yeah, like you said, patternless have popped up a few times, and this could just be what patternless look like within the Surinames.
Right.
So one boa that to this day still makes me sad was never reproduced ever again, and I don't even think it made it to breeding size. Do you remember the pearl boa?
Yeah.
Bavarian Magazine had a picture of that.
Yeah.
Like that was an animal. The closest I've seen anybody get to that animal is somebody made a ghost fire boa, and it kind of had that same like column of color going down the side.
Right.
But man, you want to talk about really missing out on a good thing in this hobby? Like that was a real special boa. And Ben, you could try to find it. You're never gonna fucking find it. I try to Google that animal every once in a while, hoping it's gonna show up. And I think the last person to have it would have been Jeremy Stone. But yeah, that was a special animal. Again, people aren't getting the full effect on this one, but it had like the back was a nice like dark gray with a reduced pattern, and then like it immediately went into like another column of a lighter gray down the side, and then the belly up was just this pearl white coming right up on it. And again, fucking perfect in every way. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, I don't know if it was a male or female, but it just never made it to breeding size, or never made it to breed.
I remember that snake. I think I don't remember the guy who originally had it, but I remember seeing the picture, and it was also on the inside of a like a pamphlet for one of the expos. I forget which one it was. I have it somewhere. I'd have to dig it up. But, you know, there's a guy at White Plains who produced some cool stuff that looks
Oh, I know
similar.
who you're talking about.
You know who I'm talking about. I don't know how far he's gone with it. I know he had a hypo into it, and but
Albino.
yeah. So those look similar. That might be the same trait. Who knows? It could express itself, you know, widely. Who knows? We don't know.
Yeah. That's another very quiet project. I know Boa King was involved with the gentleman who started that project about 5 or 6 years ago, and I think it was just a random thing that popped up within a collection.
Yeah, he just said it popped up. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, of course, you know, I begged for that guy's phone number and I never got it. I kept on getting more and more pictures of these beautiful animals he was creating, and I think it was a king snake ad he might have had up with them at one point. But there was not a lot of information outside of the ad, and again, I have never seen one made available. I believe. And what's the gentleman's name from Boa King? I haven't talked to him in a few years.
Oh, drawing a blank right now. Jesus.
I hate it too, man, because he's a great guy, and I really wish I could remember this right now. This might be a bad moment to go do some research, but
I'm getting it right now. Keep talking.
No, that's fine. But yeah, he had a relationship with the guy and did get some stock, and you know, that's another animal that I might have to duck out and go find pictures and bring it back from him to see, because I know I've got him saved in my phone. But just a really unique boa that just has not gone mainstream yet. It's already got a couple mutations in it. I don't know if that gene's going to work dominantly. We don't know if it's, I believe, maybe recessive, I'd have to say, because I wouldn't imagine the parents looked anything like that.
And what name did he give it? Do you remember?
I don't even know. It wasn't a rememberable name, which is never good for a project. But I can't remember. And like I said, every time I was at a White Plains or Long Island show, I always went over to Boa King's table and tried to weasel my way into more information about the breeder to contact him. But he kept it under wraps pretty good back in the day when I was asking questions.
Yeah.
But well, Vin, again, you know a lot more about me. You know, I'm spitting a lot of randos out you. Is there a boa that you've come across or seen in the industry that never made it to breeding that you really wish made it?
The albino surname I saw.
Yeah. That's a great one. Honestly, it had a beautiful tail. Did BPI ever have that, or who was the last people to have that animal?
Oh, I don't know. And you know, it's one of these things where I saw it in Daytona. I took a picture of it. It was on a guy's table. Somebody bought it, and then people were talking about who had it, and then they said they sold it to somebody else. It's like a mythical creature. It becomes a mythical creature. It becomes Bigfoot at that point.
Yeah.
Then it disappears, and you're wondering where did it go, what happened, and you're saying to yourself, if I had that snake, I think I could have done something with it.
Yeah, you know, sometimes, you know, especially with things like that, like the secret side of things, like when you got the only one, you really got to be secret about it. Is someone really going to catch up to you? Like, you know, embrace it, show it off, talk about the damn thing. Like, keep it under wraps until you got 100 of them to sell. Just, you know, I guess maybe from a marketing standpoint that might be good, but you know, get us excited in the meantime, man. Like, maybe you want to get it when you produce them.
You know, in this business, I believe in, you know, the boa gods looking down on me. Because in the past, if I've bragged about something that I have and I might make, it doesn't happen. So I'm the type of guy that just shuts up and doesn't say a word, because once I start making them, then I'll be like, all right, I got them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I believe in the boa gods. I do believe this can be a little more of a difficult species, but you know, like we talked about earlier, I do think that obesity is one of the biggest things in boas that makes people not successful. You know, this can't just be a fluky species that passes away back and forth. Honestly, I think we're just raising them the wrong way.
Oh yeah.
But okay, well, let's talk about a sore subject, and I think it might be a little bit of a sore subject. Let's talk about the Scoria boas. So we all have heard the backstory. They popped up in a collection. The first ones that came out were more helicoptery when it came to neurological stuff than the spider ball python. They disappeared for a long time. Richie Eiley all of a sudden had a bunch of them. There were a bunch of rumors that what happened to him at that point. And now every once in a while they're trickling out. You know, there's a lot of concerns that the females might not be able to breed, and now the females have been proven to be viable. What do you think that project has too much of that what if with it, that no one's going to want to invest that big money? Or do you think that's the kind of project that when we get to that $1,000 mark, that everyone's going to embrace it regardless of neurological issues?
I don't know. You know, what you have to, it's like appraising a car or a house. You have to take the comparables and see what they did. The comparables are the spider ball. The comparables are the Jaguar carpet. Those are the comparables. And like, you look at them and you say, how are they doing in the industry? Now, for me, I do a lot of wholesale, and a lot of the wholesalers I deal with won't buy anything with spider in it on the ball python side. And for reasons being that they don't want them to end up in pet stores where people come back to the pet store and say, you sold me a snake that has stargazer's disease, IBD, you know? So, you know, I look at that's way ahead of where the Scoria boa is today, because ball pythons are easier to breed, I should say, than boas, and they breed younger. So it may take the boa a longer time to get to that point. So if you look at the comparable in the industry, which is on the ball python side, which is the spider, you can say to yourself, you know, is it going to be worth it to spend $5,000 or $7,000 on a snake that, if and when I do breed them, I don't know if I'm going to get that back. Same with the Jaguar carpet pythons. I don't know anybody who wants one. You know? I really don't, other than to mix them into something else. But then you're still going to have that neurological problem that's attached to the trait. You're not going to erase it. People say, oh, well, you can breed it out. Oh, well, if you outcross them, you'll get rid of it. You're not getting rid of a neurological issue because, you know, it's literally an allele that's on the same allele as that trait that makes it that pattern. So you're not going to get rid of it. That's just my opinion. I think they're a beautiful snake. I mean, the colors are outrageous on those things.
Yeah. And we're going to keep talking about this. Ben, if you want to take a second, man, Google Scoria boa and make sure you go through the images until you find that perfect one, because I guarantee you there's going to be a perfect one in there.
You know, I wrote a little blurb about them in my book. Let me get it quick. It's right here.
Yeah, do you think, bud? So for the listeners, I know you guys have missed my voice. So I'm talking a whole lot today. And, you know, again, this is out of your guys' realm, Ryan. But, you know, you guys jump in when you want. You know, it's real time right now. We can do the hand raise and we can jump around on other topics. We just, you know, I'm a nerd on boas, buddy. So I'm peaking right now. Not like peaking, I'm ready to call it a day. I'm just peaking.
Now, what I had done is when I was doing the book, I wanted to put something in there. Just, you know, I obviously included the Scoria boas in the book. But I wanted to just give a quick explanation about what was going on with the trait, you know, the opinions of what's going on in the industry. Let's see what I wrote here. Okay. It's kind of long. I'm not going to read the whole thing.
That's okay.
Okay, here we go. It's become apparent that the first and all Scoria boas produced in captivity have a neurological dysfunction in that they stargaze and wobble their heads around. The trait's very similar to one that's prevalent in the spider balls and the Jaguar carpets. It's this reason that some breeders have stayed away from the morph. However, like the spider ball and the Jaguar carpets, they do eat, they do grow, and they reproduce. The question of whether or not it is humane to keep sustaining snakes with a neurological defect has been a topic of much debate in the past few years.
And it's the biggest topic. And, you know, as much
Right.
as the Jaguar brings that to the table, the spider ball python is the reason why that is a big topic. So now here's the sad part. And now this is where people's, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? when it comes to what you're willing to do in life. You're wow, I'm like half a retard right now. Morals.
Your morals?
Are we
going moral compass.
Yeah, I think moral compass. Yeah, that's good. It sounds way more intelligent for me. I'm gonna remember this maybe. That is one of the most beautiful fucking boa constrictors ever. Like that tail, the variability, and I've never seen an ugly Scoria boa.
No.
So now this is where it kind of comes into play. Like, you know, the same thing with people who still work with or spider ball pythons. You know, the bonfire ball python that we had with spider in it had this absolutely unbelievable red, and we probably get more attention for that animal than anything else we've ever produced. And it's a spider ball python. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I don't know if we're in the same boat, but spiders are always going to be that what if or, you know, scary animal. Everyone wants to stay away from her. Never going to do really great in the pet trade. But I will say this, my spider ball pythons eat better and breed better than any other ball python in the building. Yep. Like, they always want a meal. They're always ready to go. And that isn't me saying it's okay. I mean, not everyone's going to be for these, and the pet community is never going to take them on, but they are very healthy animals. But again, you're just adding to what some people consider the problem. Mm-hmm. And these guys, like you said, these are not a let's take a chance on a wobbly animal. This is a $6,000 to $8,000 investment.
Right.
So it's going to probably be 50-50 on boa breeders on whether or not they want that. And then when it comes to the pet level, kind of like the bumblebee ball python, which still is, you know, a beautiful animal, and a lot of people still love it. Will that animal at a pet cost in the future be popular? And how fast is it going to get there because of the popularity it has because of the wobble?
Right.
Because honestly, I always wanted one, but the wobble has always put me off. But really, it's one of the coolest snakes I've ever seen in boas, outside of that pearl that we were talking about earlier.
Right. Right. You know, and there's also, you know, the like I said, there's the question mark of proliferating a gene defect. You know, from what I heard, I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe a listener can verify, but from what I heard, for example, in England, you're not allowed to proliferate a genetic trait like that, like the spider balls. You're not allowed to even sell them. That's what I heard. I don't know if it's true or not. So, you know, it's the, you know, is it inhumane? I don't know. The snakes seem pretty happy. Like you said, even with the spiders, they eat and thrive and do well. I don't have a Scoria boa, so I don't know if it looks happy. Yeah, I know if a boa is doing well, you know if a boa is doing well. So I don't know. And the people that all own them are saying, oh, they're great. They're perfect. There's nothing wrong. So I don't know. I really don't know.
And, you know, kind of just jump around neurological stuff. And this is not a bash in any way, but just, you know, kind of a reflection on how different the hobby is now compared to what it was, you know, even in the late 90s, 2000s. You probably remember when the Super Aztecs were produced and they were at Daytona and they were cool looking, but
same thing.
They were, you know, about as neurological as you can get.
Right.
And the argument was, could they get to breeding size? And, you know, not throwing anybody under the bus and not trying to clear this as a negative, but there was a picture of a male Super Aztec breeding. But while it was breeding, I don't know if you remember this picture, its head was literally turned backwards to where its nose was touching its back while it was breeding. So it looked like it was stargazing while breeding. That's a tough one. Back then, I feel like that could be, or people could do that, it'd be okay. But nowadays, that just doesn't fly anymore.
You know, you've got animal rights activists. You've got, you know, the way I look at it is the less ammunition you give these people, the better, you know. So, I mean, they could say, look, they're proliferating these horrible, you know, mutants. You know? Again, it's going to be out of our control. There's nothing we're going to be able to do about it. There's always going to be somebody who's going to say, oh, you're just proliferating a horrible genetic mutation and you might as well be Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein. And then you're going to have people that are going to say, yeah, but the snakes are fine and they do well and they breed and they have babies and they eat and they're okay. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know what to say.
So you can't make everyone happy. You
No.
do what you want to do. I mean, you got to look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day, and I say that a lot. It's what you think's best for you. And again, some people chase that kind of stuff, and like we even talk about like hybrid guys, like people that'll breed a Colombian boa constrictor to a yellow anaconda. Hell, I think I saw the Brazilian rainbow boa bred to a I think it was a Colombian, and I might have sent you guys the photo, but it was kind of weird looking. Not that I didn't think it was possible, but it was kind of funny to see it. And we know back in the day, the Woma ball python, or the Woma to the ball python, the retic to the ball python, burn balls, or super balls, like
Somebody did an anaconda to a true red tail.
Oh yeah, how did that thing look?
It looked really funky. It looked like a crazy looking red tail. That was like a greenish color, yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. And like I said, just the progression. Back in the day, people were, doing the Frankenstein stuff and just having a little fun with it. And now we're so distracted by all the mutations we have. We're seeing a lot less of that. People aren't going out of their way to do it. But again, there's still some people messing around. I mean, I remember at the White Plains show back in the day, I saw the Emerald Basin bred to an Amazon tree boa, and it was the reddest thing you've ever seen. I want to say it was probably like 2002, 2003. Heck, even at that show, I think I saw the first Chihuahua to crested gecko.
Yeah,
had some nice red on it. It looked like it was a burn victim, the way the crest was gone on the head, but still kind of cool looking. But
the only issue is a lot of times when you do these crazy crosses, you create mutts that are sterile. It's like breeding a horse to a donkey. You make a mule that's sterile. So it's kind of a dead end. You might make something cool looking, but I always tell people that because people do other things too, like breed a Hog Island boa to a Suriname or whatever they want to do, and make these mutts. And I say, the pure Hog Island boa is worth far more than the mutt. Why bother? Why bother at this point? So I've got a funny story about Tom Burke. Back in the day, he bought a Corn Island boa from Gus Renfro when we were in Daytona one year. And I said, Tom, what are you going to do with that Corn Island boa? Why'd you just buy one? He's like, Vin, can you imagine these colors like in a Motley boa or a T-positive Nick? I'm like, yeah, I guess so. But I'm telling you, Tom, don't do it. So he raises this female up, and he puts I think he put a Motley boa with it, a Central American Motley. And I talked to him a couple of weeks later. I'm like, so what happened? Are you going to breed that Corn Island boa or what? He's like, I want you to come and take that Corn Island boa. I'm like, why? It's like I put a Motley boa with it, and the female killed it and ate it.
wow.
I said, see, the boa gods were listening, and they didn't want you to do it. So he totally gave up, and he's like, just take this thing, breed it to a Corn Island boa.
Wild. I feel like we've all heard of big females crushing little males, but I don't think I've ever heard of a boa eating a boa, really.
Some of these island boas are opportunistic feeding type of snakes. They've evolved eating whatever they can. So they needed calories, they'll eat each other. I know Dumeril's boas. I used to breed Dumeril's boas and had a female eat a male once. So I've had a couple of the island type race females latch onto a male, but that's when I know they're not ready to have a male with them. They're still feeding. So you just got to watch them.
Okay. So Benjamin, Ryan, you got anything? I'm frozen again, so I don't know if you're raising your hand. Are you guys just quietly listening?
I feel like all the questions I have are too basic, man. Like, you guys are out there on the fringes here.
Well, next week we're gonna find something I know nothing about, and we're gonna go with that. I'm just gonna quietly sit here.
Like for me, I want to know, like, as a somebody that wants to enter into maybe doing some stuff with the boas and knowing nothing about it from a business standpoint, like, what would your advice be to somebody who just wanted to get started with it?
On a business standpoint.
From a business angle, because obviously these pets have to pay the rent too. So.
Well, what I've always told people is if you're going to get into boas, there's a lot of discipline involved. And if you're not good with discipline and going long, then don't do boas. Do corn snakes or leopard geckos. If you're going to do boas, plan on being in it for a minimum of 4 or 5 years until they're mature enough to breed, and start from babies. Don't start from adults. Everybody's in a big rush. They want to buy adult boas, and just like Dave and I were talking about earlier, all the adult boas that get offered to me are big, fat, overfed, snakes that were fed every Friday at 6 o'clock as the kid went and bought a rat from the pet store on his way home from work, So that's 52 meals a year when they could have gotten away with be 12 meals a year.
Wow.
So, if you're going to get into boas, be prepared to be in it for the long run, and don't give up. Stick with something. I've always told people, if you're gonna do anything, stick with it, because there's a lot of people in the reptile world, and I'm sure Dave and I'm sure you guys have seen, they get into something and they're enthusiastic about it and they're really gung-ho, but they don't stick with it. They do it for a year or two, and then you see them selling them at their table at White Plains or in Daytona, and they're like, "Oh, I'm getting out of these. I'm going to do ball pythons now." It's like, all right, well, you just wasted 2 years or 3 years, whatever it may be. So if you're going to get into it, do it for real. Don't screw around. Be disciplined and go for the long run. I've been doing this since I'm 15 years old, and I'll be 52. So what is that? 37 years.
Good about time.
And I have snakes that I can date back that I've had their bloodline since the late 80s. So I still have them. Not the exact same snake from that time, but I have its ancestors. I have the provenance of those snakes. So that's my number one advice to people getting into breeding snakes for a business.
Is there a project or something that you would recommend? Like, do you think there's a better market in localities that aren't morphs,
No.
or do you think?
I don't. I think either one is good. It's just a matter of sticking with it. I do both because I've been into locality boas since I'm a kid, and I've been into morphs too. So I do both. I just keep them separate. I try not to mix and match too much. I have mixed albino with blood and albino with leopard and all that stuff, but I've also kept my pure lines pure. Like if I have a boa from Lloyd Lemke Brazil, bloodline, I'm not going to mix it with anything else but the Lloyd Lemke Brazil line. So, it's like I can't tell somebody, oh, stick with only the locality boas. They're better and they'll hold their value longer. I'd be lying, because some do, some don't. And I can't say to somebody, oh, stick with morphs. They hold their value. It depends on what you're passionate about, and it's got to come out in it's got to reflect in what you produce,
I mean, you're going to have to look at this animal every day. And, I guess one thing kind of what he's asking too is, as we know, some boas can be a little more difficult to breed, and some of these dwarf ones, I've heard people have a really good success rate with. The only thing was, for a while there, the Nicaraguan and Central American stuff in general weren't selling very well, and people got out of them. But those animals I find are a lot easier to breed, and what you guys are doing right now with, a lot of smaller species, I would probably be starting something along those lines, in all honesty.
Well, there's a common sense reason why those snakes are easier to breed in captivity, and the number one compensating factor is their size. If you take into respect the size of, let's say, a larger Colombian boa or a larger constrictor, that's, 10, 15 pounds. Compare that to a Nicaraguan boa that may be 2 or 3 pounds, 3 or 4 pounds. What I'm getting at is the snake with more mass is going to take longer for its body temperatures to heat up and cool down with the seasonalities. So, and because it's got so much mass, it might not know the seasonalities are changing in your building because it's a larger snake. The smaller snakes cool down and warm up much easier because they have far less mass to cool down and warm up. So they're easier to maintain and easier to have them thermoregulate in a smaller environment. So it's pretty much, you know, a simple equation why they do breed easier in captivity. So, you know, obviously, to me, the smaller races are where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
For, you know, ease of breeding, for size of the tubs and enclosures, size of the prey items, you know.
Cool.
That's my advice.
Yeah. I mean, mutation-wise, I mean, bloods and leopards will always be a very popular dwarf boa. I find bloods are sometimes a little more popular than your leopard boas, but when it comes to variability within your patterns, leopard boas are unbelievable. So, you know, I think that's a great way. And then, of course, you know, within those, you have your pure aneurystheristics. You do have a hypomelanistic line. So there's things you can do with it. You're a little limited on what comes out of the Sonoran Desert, but I know of those 3 mutations at least for sure.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. So, I mean, and you're right. With the leopards, you can have striped, spotted, patternless. There's everything, you know.
I really like the IMG boas.
Those are hot now. I mean, people really love them. And, you know, I remember going to Pete Call's place years ago and him having that jet black original. He called it an Azabachi boa.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I'm like, Pete, where did this thing come from? He's like, Vin, this was born in a litter of aneurystheristic Colombians. And it was just a really dark gray as a baby, so I kept it, and it just kept getting darker and darker and darker until it turned jet black. And I think the first time he bred it to a sunglow boa. And he made hypo IMGs right out of the gate that were smoking hot. And, you know, so then that's how the whole thing started. So those things are pretty cool. They're really cool.
Yep. IMGs have always been a fan favorite. I think they're going to be for a long time. I mean, it seems like in any species, if you can make a jet black animal, people are going to want it. And with that rainbow iridescence they get as an adult, they are beautiful. And, you know, it's, you know, for an animal that goes all black too, like, it's one of the more exciting mutations, in my opinion, because we've seen some of the crosses, and like Vin said, with the original hypos, beautiful animals, a lot of color fighting through. The T-positive forms, like we were talking with Tom having with those guys, unbelievable looking adults. You know, it's not a dead-end project. You're not making just a black snake. Don't get me wrong, if you put it with a motley bow, you're going to make the blackest snake you've ever seen. But, you know, there is color tones you can still get with the right crosses with those animals.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And, you know, you can also, I'm working on bonsaiing them because, you know, I've got a male from you, Dave, that's got the Central American blood in it with the what was it, black-eyed anery you used?
Yeah, black-eyed interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's already got, and plus, you know, people don't realize the first breeding Pete did was to sunglow, which is, you know, a good percentage of Central American right there. So, you know, I'm trying to bonsai him and scale him down. I bred him to my pure blood boas to try and get, you know, an IMG blood boa that stays smaller than, you know, a Colombian. So, you know, there's a lot of cool stuff that can be done. I know that's one of my blood boas there. That's one I ended up leaving behind in Germany last year, and my friend Robert ended up buying that from me after I got back. So, and he did that video. That's a really nice snake.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
But you know what are you going to get when you mix IMG into that? Are you going to get a red snake with jet black markings? I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully, something.
So, I don't know how to explain it or the details of it, but I do believe there was a gentleman this past year that made blood IMGs, and he may have had jungle in them also. I got to do those pictures up. But after seeing that, I immediately paired our blood boas to a ghost IMG, just to kind of start going to the plasma. Plasma, is that pure Central American aneurystheristic bloods, or is that when you have Colombian type 1 aneurystic in it.
No, a plasma is a ghost blood.
Okay, a hypo 2.
Yeah, so it's hypoaneurystic in blood. The pewter is a aneurystic blood.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if anybody's used the Colombian type 1 aneurysm in blood boas yet, because most blood boas have that type 2 anery gene in them already. Because one of the first breedings that Ron St. Pierre did way back when was a blood boa to a type 2 anery. So I produce type 2 aneries often, and I try to avoid it because red snakes sell better than black ones. Well, black anery snakes. You know, I get more money for a blood red than I can for an anery.
So did we talk about the type 2 aneurysticks and the black eye type 2 aneurysticks last time, where I was throwing a theory at you that I believe that the type 2 black-eyed aneurystic is more of an axanthic trait over an aneurystic trait?
No, we didn't talk about that, but I agree with you.
Right. And I think back in the day, because I remember I bought Haas double hets, I know the Colombian T negative was bred into the type 2 aneurysticks, and nothing ever came out of them. And then Big Mike a couple years ago, basically Boa, started doing the blizzards with the type 2 black-eyed aneurysticks. And he also did the Black Devils, which was the type 2 aneurystic IMGs, which were phenomenal looking.
Yep.
But, you know, that is one project that I'm actually kind of sad about, because way back in the day, I got a pair from Bill Gaines, and they were blue, and they were stripy, and they were perfect. And they ended up going to Adam Chesla. And that was around my time of my boa fear, and I was kind of getting rid of boas and getting ball pythons.
And what were they, type 2? I mean, they were black-eyed aneries?
Oh, say that again?
Were they black-eyed aneries?
Yeah, they were type 2 black-eyed aneurysticks from Bill Gaines.
Right.
I traded him an engagement ring that he had given his wife for their 30th anniversary, and in return, I got those two animals. It wasn't a super pricey engagement ring, but the two animals I got were beautiful, and I had them for like 6 months to a year, and I got a little scared, and they went away to Adam Chesla, which I'm still bummed out to this day, because the black-eyed type 2 aneurysticks, in my opinion, are one of the cooler aneurystic lines to work with, or axanthic lines in boas right now. And you know, after seeing the Black Devil stuff and the Blizzard stuff, I might not have went that route, of course, but I still wish I had some of that stock around.
Right.
Yep,
you screwed up, man.
Yeah, well, I was young, buddy. We all make mistakes when we're young. I'm sure you got rid of some stuff too over the years.
Oh yeah, there's lots of things, but what are you gonna do?
But you know, another cool boa that I always really appreciated from the East Coast was Ralph Davis's Freak Boa.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
you guys can bring that up. It was a two-faced. One of the eyes was albino, the other one was aneurystic. The tongue was split. It was a paradox.
It was a paradox snow.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And I saw it, I got to see it in person at Ralph's place, I think in like 2008. And she was a little older at that time, but yeah, that was another animal I remember back in the day obsessing over, just because it was a one-of-a-kind animal. And of course, you know, like a lot of other paradox animals that pop up in different species, we all want to be genetic, but they never prove out.
Right. I think the only paradox that ever proved out are those Kenyan sand boas.
Yeah, and I think we dabbled on that a little bit last time. And yeah, other than that, I really don't think there's anything else that's ever proved out. And there's been some arguments in Colombian boas where there's some albinos that throw them a little more commonly when it comes to paradoxes, but when it comes to actually genetic, it's just never going to happen. Just hasn't happened yet.
Right. And you know, something else that we didn't talk about last time was the there's the freak, lead the freak. What we didn't talk about last time was the different forms of T positive albino from Central America. You know, there's the Honduran, which originated with Frake with the onyx boas. You know, he's made T positive onyx and T positive red barons and stuff. Now that T positive trait has been mixed with the Tom Burke Nicaraguan T positive trait and made double hets, and the homozygous of those the double homozygous of those is called the angel. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have. Was that in Europe?
Yeah, it was all done over in Europe. Nobody here is even close to that yet. I'm trying it now, but I'm a few steps behind. I'm breeding one of Frake's T positives to a Tom Burke Nicaraguan, just to make the double hets. But that thing looks pretty cool. I mean, it's almost albino looking in a way. You know,
Yeah.
it's two T positives in one. You know.
Yeah, no, I thought those were pretty unique. I haven't seen any color progression pictures with them, but like you said, as babies, it looks like we took two T positives and made a T negative.
Right. They like negate each other.
Yeah, but no, I thought that was a really unique one.
Think about what's that going to look like as a blood boa. You know, it might be pretty cool.
Yeah, it takes you to a whole new realm of now talking triple hets, which is not a super common thing in boa constrictors. Snow projects, if you want to consider hypos, but I don't think we're calling those anymore. But no, I thought that was a pretty cool thing to do. And, when it comes to Europe, man, they're just so far ahead of us on so much stuff like that. That's one thing the United States doesn't realize is when the European market started developing, whether you're talking boa constrictors or leopard geckos, when they went through the trouble of getting stock from the United States, they got the best of the best. And that's all they would buy. And because of that, the Europeans are further ahead on us on a lot of leopard gecko projects, further ahead on a lot of boa projects when it comes to line breeding. They just started with the best of the best, and now they have some of the best animals in the world.
Yeah, they have some really good stuff there. I mean, I have some friends over there that I talk to regularly, and I think the reason why they're a little ahead in some of those. Well, number one, that Honduran T positive originated in Europe, so in Frake's collection. So they weren't here anyway, so it's not like anybody could have worked with them here. But since they were there, and then people were getting T positive from the Burke line stuff over there, they started mixing them in, thinking, what are we going to get out of this? So it's like, and since they had a smaller gene pool, they had less things to work with, and they had to concentrate on certain things. So. They're ahead in a bunch of things. They're a little behind in others, but they're definitely ahead in something. I mean, Frake is my friend Frake from FN Reptiles. He's way ahead of a lot of guys over there. I mean, he's really got it together for sure. I mean, he's one of the few guys that I met in Europe that breeds boas consistently and does it, for a living. There's not too many guys that do that there, not at all.
That's interesting. There's a few guys I followed up in Europe. Of course, I've been following the purple sharp stuff for years, which I'm still trying to figure out what that is. I don't know if that's a strong pastel line they bred into it. I even heard rumors back in the day the fire belly was bred into it. I heard the blue phase might have some sunset / Hog Island blood put into it. Do you know anything about any of the lineage on any of the purple sharp stuff over in Europe?
Well, my opinion is, because I've seen them too over there, there's a lot more sharp albinos in Europe than there are in the U.S. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think, people don't realize this, but Brian Sharp, the first time he bred that female sharp albino, he bred it to a het call albino to see if it was the same trait. Yeah. And he didn't make any albinos. They were all normal looking snakes. So every single sharp albino in the world today is possible het for call. I have a feeling that those purple things may be the double homozygous call sharp albino.
Okay, that's a very interesting take on that. That's nothing I've ever heard before.
Yeah. Again, it's just my opinion. Don't hold it against me. Don't yell at me. Don't give me bad emails.
Hey, I'm over here throwing Fire Belly and Hog Island in it and probably fucking up a project for somebody by making hybrids. So let's just pretend like that never happened. No, and that's the funny thing too. We always talk about the rumor mills in this hobby. The reality is, as soon as you tell somebody something and they repeat it, it is a fact. Like it is harder to bury that than anything else. But no, like I said, the European stuff's cool, and they've got a lot of unique. They got the Domino project over there, the Raptor project, which I really like. Just a lot of inconsistencies with that project since it came to the United States. But some are unbelievable, some are just not as nice. So I don't know if there's a little more to that project we got to learn, but the Domino, again, it's not like the craziest thing ever, but I'm really digging the Domino gene over there right now.
And there's a lot of T positive stuff over there too, Colombian T positive. And I was there back in, well, I was there last year, but the time I went before that was 2012, I think. And me and Frank were walking around, and there was a guy who had these T positive boas. It may have been before 2012. You know, when you get, the older you get, time goes faster. But we were walking around. It was a guy who had these really funky looking T positive boas. They looked like they could have been in the same complexes like the VPIs. Really cool looking, and the guy was showing them to me, saying, you know, you should buy these. And I had no way of getting them home anyway, but I was just curious, and I looking at it. I think I took a picture of them. And we walked away, and Frank's like, don't buy those boas. I'm like, I wasn't planning on it. He's like, those guys feed the boas garbage, you know, from Poland or something. I don't know. And he's like, who knows where those things came from? They could have, you know, given them something to make them look that color. We don't know. But my point is, they never popped up again. It's like, where did they go? You know, was Frank right? Were they trying to, you know, hoodwink me into something because they knew who I was? And, you know, so I think I saw at least 2 or 3 different types of, you know, T positive looking Colombian based boas over there that never came to fruition. Like, where'd they go? Where are they? You know?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and again, even like that mysterious project you guys have in your region right now, the modern day pearl.
Right.
Man, that something's been being worked on for a long time. But when it comes to what the hell's going on with it, I don't have the slightest clue. You probably know 10 times more about that project than I do right now, and I bet you don't even know a whole lot about it.
No, I don't know much about it. The guy who had him, I talked to him once or twice in Daytona, and, you know, gave me little bits and pieces of information, and gave me his business card with no phone number on it, no email address.
Yeah, that was one rumor I heard, is that he didn't even have a cell phone,
Right.
and it was very hard to get a hold of him.
Right.
I will say that's a pretty boss move, just handing someone a business card without any way to get a hold of you like that. That's I don't even want to say arrogance. That's just that's a power move right there, buddy. Like, how bad do you want it?
And he didn't really have anything for sale, too, every time I saw him, you know? So, who knows?
Yeah. I know of one person, and again, Boa Kings. Did we ever figure out what his name was? I
can't find it on my phone, and I talk to him every time I go there.
Yeah, that's bad. I hope he's not listening to our podcast.
Yeah, he's right. Those jerks didn't remember my name.
Yeah, right. So another boa, man, that I really wish was more mainstream when it comes to mutation nowadays. T positive Argentines. I remember back in those early Daytona days, seeing those big adult females on a Reptile by Max table. Same time that you saw like Hans come with his full table full of leopard boas. But man, you want to talk about a special animal? Like, those are probably my favorite T positives to date in boa constrictors.
And you know what's really cool about all that is that people don't realize this, but, you know, John Mack produced motleys also from the same bloodline of Argentine boas, as well as those T positives, and he even made motley T positives too, back in the day. Now he doesn't have any of that stuff anymore. I've spoken to him about it, but what I'm getting at is his original stock originated from Eugene Bissett, and now Eugene's stuff. I have some of Eugene's stuff, the Argentine boas, and I've never made a T positive with them. You know, it's like, you know, he just so happened, John Mack just so happened to have his animals that were hets that made those T positives. And I guess that motley may have been a spontaneous gene mutation. Who knows? I mean, to me, that's amazing.
Yeah. You know, I always find it amazing in mutations that come in the country where they always are piggybacked a lot of times by another mutation. And we see that a lot in ball pythons. You know, the blackhead gene had the ringer gene with it, and the red gene, I believe they say. The original, I believe the original Cypress had the honey gene in it also. And there's numerous other mutations I feel like in ball pythons come up, but there's another one hidden in there. And like you said, in pure motley Argentine popping up within it already in the T positives, like, no one's that lucky. Like, that doesn't just happen. I mean, you had blood boas pop up in with your pure Nicaraguans at one point, right?
Yeah, I was blown away, and I'm sitting there looking at the cards, like, where did this female come from? You know, because she's like 3 generations in. I'm like, so I finally find the last card on the back. It says, you know, Ben Siegel hypo from Ben Siegel hypo Nick 2001 or something like that. So it's like a Ben Siegel hypo Nick bred to one of its, you know, litter mates or whatever. Made hypo nicks, sold them for years. Never bred anything related back to that female. Only bred from that. You know, I bought a few things from Ben that year, and I think it was 2015. I bred. Then I looked to see who the male was, and it turns out it was her son. Bred the son back to the mother or the sister. I forget. I have it written down. But they were related. It was the first time I bred 2 related, and popped out like 5 blood boas. You know, I was blown away. Blown away.
It was Barry. Is it Barry Berg? I believe it was. Or Barry Miller. What's Barry's name, man? Correct me.
Which Barry?
The Barry that had the same thing happen that you did. There was the Barry line of bloods for a while because he had bred a Nicaraguan to a blood and made blood boas.
Barry, yeah, John Barry.
John Barry.
There's two John Barrys. There's an American John Barry and there's a British John Barry.
Yeah, I'm not that cultured. Let's stick to the United States for now.
Well, the blood boas were with the British John Barry.
Oh, really? Well, shit.
Well, okay. He was here in the U.S. when he did it, but he ended up going back.
Okay. I remember that. I really thought he was always here, but yeah, that was another random one, right? Just bred a blood to a normal Nicaraguan to make hets, and boom, blood boas.
Right.
And I know we marketed those guys a little differently. Some people argued they were a little more on the red side. Was there any truth behind that, or was that all just marketing in that project?
You know, the blood boa trade itself is, I'm not going to say it's random, because you can pick redder snakes and make redder snakes. But in the beginning, all of the blood boa stuff I made was random. Some were really red, some were orange, some were a little burnt brown. But I only kept the really red things, and I kept breeding those. So even to this day, in a big blood boa litter, there's going to be a lot of variation. They're not all going to be the same. And it's no different than if you breed a pair of Nicaragua boas to each other or a pair of hypo nicks. You're not going to get any 2 that look exactly alike in that litter. It's the same with the bloods, because they're all Central American boas. They're highly variable. They really are.
Oh yeah. So talking about the variability in the blood project, talking a little more about you. What's going on with your patternless animals that are popping up in your blood project?
Well, you know, Ron St. Pierre was telling me when he first got those original blood boas from those bags of El Salvador boas that he picked through, he found three bloods, 2 or 3 anneries, and 1 patternless looking thing. Oh, and he told me he even found a T positive too back then. Yeah. Which I guess just didn't come to fruition, or whatever happened. I don't know. But he said that he did breed that patternless looking Central American boa into the blood stuff, and sold off the project before it came to fruition. So the snakes were literally scattered into the wind. And I bred one of my original blood boas, which is a Ron St. Pierre derived animal, into orange tail hypos, made some orange tail hypos het for blood, and they had like striping tails. They had really long stripes in their tails. Now, I've made lots of orange tail hypos and salmons with that striping in the tail. You know, it's there. I didn't think anything of it, but when I bred those orange tail hypos het blood with the striping in their tail to each other, I started making some of those patternless looking things. I didn't know what they were. And later on spoke to Ron, and he showed me a picture of one of those patternless, the original patternless snake. So it made sense, because I made some normal looking ones too in those litters that were not non-blood boas that were that patternless trait too. So I have it floating around in there. I've kind of figured out which ones are the hets. and I pop them out every once in a while. Well, every year.
All right. So this recessive is more than random. You believe it is a recessive project within that?
Oh, it's recessive. Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I've always enjoyed looking at those guys on your table. I just never asked about it. I just thought it was a random reduced pattern that just kind of popped up now and again.
No, it's kind of got an answer to it. It's duplicatable, at least in my collection. Now, I don't know if somebody's going to buy one, breed it to something completely unrelated, and get the same results. I don't know. They may have to make hets and start over again. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the trait is in my building.
Okay. Well, you want to talk about more boas?
Whatever you want.
Super Stripe project, man. What the heck? Like, I know, not that there was any mismanagement necessarily in that, but that's another really unique project in boa constrictors that I know Conley Herps is now just kind of mixing into some stuff. And there was a lot of mystery early on because I thought that was like an SPCA animal that was fully striped, and they didn't know if it was Central American or Colombian. What do you think's coming out of that project? Do you think that could maybe get some legs soon? Because that's a pretty legit fully striped project, and we don't really have that in boas.
Yeah, well, supposedly it originated with a guy, Matt Jablonski.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think he took it to full fruition. I know Anthony LeCompte ended up with it, and he took it a little further. You're right, but he just started making albinos now with it, albino super stripes.
Yeah, he was able to make albinos, and he was able to make sunglows. And I have one animal in my collection from him, and it's a super stripe. But man, it is a funky looking animal, dude. It almost looks hypomelanistic. Like there's no black pigment on it whatsoever. The dorsal is more of a maroon color, and she has been slow grown for about 6 years, and I've yet to breed her. I don't know what the heck to do with it. I don't have a male for it. It's just a really unique animal that I like from him, and I had to have it when Anthony had it, I think, like a Columbia, South Carolina show, and she's there, and she's healthy, and she looks beautiful, but I just haven't thought of what to do.
So it's a full-blown super stripe. It's not like because some of them were partially striped. Did you realize that?
It's a full chain-linked kind of looking super stripe, but the color's all wrong. It's just the colors never made any sense. And
I had three animals from Anthony for a long time too, and I never really got anything much out of them. But they were sold to me as possible hets. But they had really funky markings and chain links and stripes. And you're right, every one of them had a really weird greeny, browny color to them. Yeah. So it kind of makes me think that they might be mixed. I mean, there might be some Central American blood in them. Who knows?
I mean, that was always what they thought back in the day, is that there was Central in there. And I think that's one of the things that scared people away from the project in the first place, maybe. But again, we don't really have genetic fully striped animals in boa constrictors, and that is the most fully striped thing that you could produce. And like you said, Anthony made the albinos and sunglows this past year, and that's another thing. Those animals dripping with color, like the background on them are always incredible.
Yeah. I saw them. I think it's a very underrated project. I've told Anthony this from the beginning. I'm like, you better keep this project going because nobody else really has it,
Yeah. I know he's doing a couple breeder loans on it, and just talking about it now gets me excited when I'm gonna run out and get some more, in all honesty, because again, I have always thought they were unique, but the variability in the hets, a lot of those hets look like they're genetic super stripes.
Right. Right.
And I don't know if the argument comes into play with that, kind of like with the leopard boas. You can pick the hets out, arguably. Do you still think the leopard boa project's a recessive, or would you consider that a codom, considering the variability in the hets?
If you would have asked me 2 years ago, I would have said, "Oh, it's incomplete dominant," because I could pick out the hets,
Yeah.
But I picked out what I thought was a het, super hyposonoran het leopard, about 4 years ago, and this past. Well, 5 years ago, this past summer, I bred her to a leopard. She had 18 babies. There wasn't one leopard in there.
Okay.
know.
Bad odds?
I don't know. I missed out on the odds. I'm starting to think that she's not ahead, even though she's got all the markings on her. But who knows? You know, there are a lot of genetic markers on het leopards. There's a few of them, and they're easy to pick out. But they're also genetic. There are also little markers that can be on something that's not a leopard too. So, is it incomplete dominant? It probably is. I mean, Frank proved that it's incomplete dominant on his side with the onyx, which is in the similar complex. It makes a similar result. He calls the onyx the het part of of his, and the super onyx is the all black, almost patternless looking leopard boa. And I have his stuff too, and you can. It's a little easier to see in the onyx, the het part of it, you can see pretty easily. Now on our leopards, it's not as easy to see, but it's there. There's a lot of markers.
Okay. So the onyx, I mean, it is compatible with the leopard boa, whether we want to argue it's allelic or the same trait,
what? When you breed an onyx to a leopard boa, it doesn't look exactly like a leopard boa. And it doesn't look exactly like an onyx boa. It's like something in between. It's kind of weird looking.
So, arguably allelic?
It is allelic. Oh, yeah. It is allelic. To me, I compare it to like breeding a... well, it's not a good comparison, but the only comparison I can think of is breeding a platinum to a Mojave or a platinum to a Het Russo. You're going to get a certain degree of white snake. You get the really good white snake, Russo to Russo, or Platy Daddy to Platy Daddy, or you get the whiter stuff with the purities. When you start mixing stuff, some of them have like the stripe, and they're all mixed and matched. And I think that's what it is with breeding the leopard to the onyx. You're going to get something that's not as good as a leopard, not as good as an onyx, but something in between. But if you breed leopards and leopards, you get, like we were talking earlier, you're going to get stripy, spotty, stars and stripes, all this funky stuff, And when you do the onyx to onyx, you get almost jet black looking, patternless, to some that have barely a pattern. They all have that leopard looking head with the black eyes. So it's an allelic gene. It's on the same allele, but it expresses itself differently, And reason being, one is originated from Sonora and the other one originated from Honduras. So they're a little off from each other, but they're, similar traits. But they do make different things. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that argument. I've always thought the genes had to be so similar. There had to be some, they had to be compatible in some way. But, it's interesting. I got to do more research on that one because that's one I haven't paid enough attention to.
Here's the perfect example. When you breed a leopard to a motley and you make motley het leopards, Central American motley het leopards, right? And then you breed those, then you make the motley leopard. What do they call that? A blackberry?
I think it was blackberry.
Yeah. And the other one, if you use the Colombian motley, they call it an eclipse, correct?
Yeah.
Now, if you do the onyx boa and you breed that to a Central American motley, and then you make the motleys het for onyx and then make the motley onyx, Frank calls that a sumatin. That looks nothing like a blackberry. It looks nothing like an eclipse. So that to me is like what makes it a little different. They make different things. The ingredients make different things.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And again, we're limited with genes and boas. So, when stuff like this pops up, allelic traits. And of course, the one that always stood out the most in boas was the Bowman caramel to the sharp. Still to this day, and I'm not making fun, who would ever would have thought to breed a sharp albino to a Bowman caramel? I know we were limited in genes back then, but I never would have thought anybody would think to put those two together. And then to end up finding out a T negative and a T positive or allelic, I thought that was peculiar. Well, do you think the sharp albino is just, it's a T negative, but do you think there's any T positive in it in a sense genetically? Not is it a T positive, but what are the chances of a T negative and a T positive being allelic with each other?
Well, here's the thing. Something similar was done in corn snakes. They call them ultramels. And you breed an albino corn snake to this, what was it? I used to do it all the time. To an ultra, you got the ultramel. It's like you got this totally different looking snake that was both ultra and albino in one. And it's the same exact thing with the sharp albino to the boa woman caramel. He called those paradigms, right?
Yeah, the paradigm.
And Mike was the first guy who did that, I think. Mike White.
Yeah, Mike. I'm 100% sure Mike did that first.
Yeah, because I talk to Mike all the time, but it's like this happened so long ago. The way I look at it is, you got to know your genetics, and what's happened is that sharp albino gene is turning on something in the boa woman caramel, what I would call T positive, So there's a T negative gene that's turning on a T positive gene to make something different, something in between. They see it in birds because bird breeders are way ahead of us. They've been breeding birds for 100 years in captivity. They're seeing it in different, maybe even fish. They're probably seeing a similar scenario. It's hard to comprehend, but it makes sense to me.
Hey, you're smarter than me. This is never going to make sense to me personally. But like I said, I just thought it was always peculiar. And back in the day when VPIs were $1 million, the Paradigm Project was kind of like the poor man's T positive. And a lot of people went that route. It was great. You could buy a het boa woman caramel and breed it to a het sharp and make a T positive animal.
Right.
But even with that being said, now people went that route and it kind of took over that project. But the boa woman caramel by itself, and Dustin Thomas a couple years ago made some really phenomenal looking pure, or just straight boa woman caramel babies, and they looked arguably better than some of the Pink Panther VPIs I've seen. So that's another project that if I don't do it myself, I really hope, other than Mike, someone really starts focusing on that lineage of T positive, because I think we can go a whole nother direction with that and get a different color tone in our adults.
Oh, even add an IMG into that,
Oh, yeah. Dustin made really great looking ones a couple years ago, and I just remember they had all kinds of pinks and peaches coming through on the sides. But again, we all got lost in the paradigm thing. It was easy to make them back in the day. Everybody went that route. Parahets became very confusing for people, and then eventually VPIs came down in price enough that everyone just kind of ditched that project completely.
It's a shame. It's like, it just goes to show you the lack of people wanting to educate themselves. It's and here's a perfect example. Tom Burke, when he first got those T positives from Ben Siegel, Tom knew everything about tyrosinase positive. He just did his homework. He knew everything about that gene and how it worked. And I remember him talking to me about it, and it's just like something you need to do. And again, if you're going to get into a project, you got to know what it is. You got to know what makes it happen. You've got, Nick Mutton's another example. He knows everything about genes and genetics. That guy's, a genetics, dictionary. He because this is what he does for a living. I know a lot about genetics because this is what I do for a living too. And I was interested in it as a kid in high school and wanted to learn about it. But my point is, these people got out of working with a project because they were too illiterate to figure out how it worked. It's like, learn. There's plenty of information online and in books about genetics that we know nothing about. To this day, people still use the words codominant. There's nothing really codominant in the reptile world. They're all incomplete dominant, and I don't know why they use the codominant thing, but it stuck. It came around early on, and everybody was erroneously using the wrong terminology for a specific trait, and it stuck. So,
man, I think I've used codom like 15 times in this conversation today, and like you said, I know it's wrong, but it's the norm.
That's what people know.
Yeah. So, and maybe that'll change in 20 years. I don't think so. I think it's got a stranglehold on us all. And some of us ball python breeders, and I'm raising my hand, I'm a ball python guy. We're a little simple-minded sometimes. I like co-dom and saying co-dom when it comes to ball python traits, and that's never going to stop. But I was thinking about jumping into something else there. Hey, Benjamin and Ryan, what do you got going on over there right now?
I'm just Googling all these freaking morphs you're talking about while I'm like, just trying to keep up, bro. Just trying to keep
Figure
up.
out what your boa buy is going to be.
I can always talk other stuff too, but I would go to a different topic, but it's up to you if you want to keep rolling down boas.
Well, I don't think we've covered every gene, but I think we've probably covered 99% of what has ever happened in boas genetically. I think I might have forgot a couple that never really made it, but no, I think that's a pretty good boa conversation. I mean, Ben, I know you want to talk more about building business and just different directions we can go in. What are you thinking, bud?
So the snake that's right behind you, Vin, what do you you want to talk about the Russo ball python?
Now, don't forget, we talked about this last time.
The Russo ball.
Yeah, so I don't mean to interrupt. So we got the entire backstory about it being mixed with pastel and all that. We can repeat it, but I don't think we should repeat it in a boa episode. Not to be rude.
It's true.
I was sort of thinking where could you see it going? What could you do with it now, kind of deal? Because it's one of those things it's one of those genes that
Don't say it. Don't call it a dead end gene.
No. It's one of those genes that you see pops up in something really cool, and then but then sometimes you don't hear about it for a little while. So I think there's what are the cool things you've seen with it or a direction that you think people should go with it? That was more what I was thinking. I know that we talked about the history of it before, but
it is an incomplete dominant gene in that the hets are a very bright yellow normal with reduced black. I wouldn't call them hypos, but they have reduced black and abundance of yellow. And when you breed two of those to each other, you make the super form, which is all white. Now, in the beginning, when I first started making these back in 2001, there was, people would say, oh, it's a dead end trade. It's all you're going to do is make white snakes. Who gives a shit? I was like, yeah, but hold on a second. The hets make some interesting things. I know Jim Stepplug made a clown with the het Russo in it, which was really cool looking. I've made a bunch of stuff with the hets, and I made pied het Russos, which I call pinto pieds. That's the coolest thing I've made out of these things. It's the whitest pied you can get. Some of them have just a spot on their head and a spot on their body, and that's it. Some of them have a blotch of orange and a pure white head. So you can make cool things with the hets for sure. The leucistics I've made in albino form. I call it the polar ball. It's an albino leucistic. I've mixed it also into mystic, and I call it the invisible. So it's not quite pure white, but it's white with a pattern. So then you got to keep trying, and you can't. People get they follow things online and forums and listen to 12-year-old kids talking about stupid crap, and they get tunnel vision and they don't step outside the box. Our program today started talking about Tom Burke. Tom Burke stepped outside the box all the time, and I learned that from him too. You've got to have a vision, and you got to take chances. You got to be willing to not make a few $1,000s on that litter to make some triple hets or double hets, or just to see what you're going to get, just because maybe that might be one step to the next step to the next step, So that's what this business is all about, taking chances. That's what any business is all about, taking chances. Who said it? The greatest risk in life is no. If you don't take it, I can't come up with it. Greatest risk in life is not taking a chance. Is not taking a chance. You got to take the chance.
Yeah, I agree. So to chime in for 1 second, just to kind of like talk about, you know, the mindset of ball python breeders in 2010, 2020, and like you said, what we can do with the Russo gene now. You know, back in 2010, the super form of most of these animals made people decide what direction they wanted to go in. And when we ran into a lot of allelic animals for the leucistics, you know, a lot of people looked at it as dead ends, but like, you know, like you said, the clown was phenomenal with the Russo gene. It increased the flames on the side. It gave a lot of potential. And even some of the stuff we saw this year with the special gene being bred into clowns. Like, you know, that's a color tone that not everyone could have seen. But, you know, the right person that had the right vision went that direction and made some great looking animals. And, you know, like I said, the super form of certain things did scare people away from actually building on projects because the imagination wasn't there. But a lot of these genes, disco, you know, we brought up Sable last time. You know, the super form was shit, so everyone got away from Sable. But the Russo, I think there's a ton of potential, and I think we're going to see a lot more Russo combos in the near future. And the fact that it's already circulating around in clowns, I bet you we're going to see some phenomenal 3 to 5 gene combos in clowns with Russo next year that are going to blow our mind that we never thought could be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at it this way. It's an ingredient. You're stacking on top of, you know, if you take the Russo trait, which is yellow, and then you add on yellow belly, which is like orangey, and then you add on orange dream, and then you add on a clown, and then you add Enchi. It's like you've got all these things that are just pulling color out. You know, you don't know what you're going to get. I don't know if anybody's made an Enchi, clown, Russo, orange dream, yellow belly yet. You know?
Yeah. I made Inchi Russos years ago, and I tried getting everyone to call it the Fupa ball, and it never caught on.
That's the name. I can remember you bring that up every once in a while. I can never remember the Fupa ball.
Yeah. No, yeah, it didn't take. I think Frank down at Reptile Basics, I can't remember his last name, but I think I said it to him and he thought it was hilarious, but I think he was the only one that laughed at that joke. But no, all right, well, you guys keep rolling, man. I'm just gonna sit here quietly.
Ryan, your turn.
What are you talking about? Oh man. My brain's fried, dude. I'm tired.
I'm not to put you on the spot. So, okay, so for a Vin Russo in the modern day hobby, somebody who has a very close collection, what is it that would get you excited enough about a species to jump into it nowadays? Like, are you pretty satisfied with your collection, or do you think you're always be going after something new to keep it fresh?
You know, I'm at the point now where I've been doing this for a long time that I'm pretty satisfied with what I have. You know, I have a veritable Noah's Ark of what I like in my building. As far as adding to it, I like keeping closed facility. I don't like bringing anything into the building. It's too much risk for me to bring stuff in. I would have to quarantine stuff for a long time in order to bring it in. You know, if Cameron or my friend Quetzal or somebody from who's still bringing in animals from other countries called me up and said, Vin, I just got some boas in from Ecuador or Peru or, you know, the Amazon basin of Colombia, and they look a little different than what we've been seeing, I'd be like, all right, I got to have some of those, you know. You know, my friend Quetzal, there's a picture in my book. Quetzal was in Ecuador, and they found a completely patternless boa in a mangrove swamp, and not just one. They found 2. So it's a different race of boa. He came here, and we went to the museum of not the museum. We went to Washington, D.C. to look at some preserved specimens at the Smithsonian to see if we can find if there was something similar from, you know, the dark ages of when they were preserving boas. We didn't find anything. But, you know, stuff like that. You know, what is it? A mangrove boa? It's imperator. It's not, you know, it's not a tree boa. It's imperator. So what's the story with that? Is it a locality type? Or is it just a patternless snake that just so happens to be 2 in the wild that were caught many years apart? You know, stuff like that gets me going. As far as ball pythons, I mean, I love my ball python collection, but I don't think I'm going to invest in anything. I like that monsoon thing with all the spots on it. That looks really cool. I'm sure everybody else does too. I'm sure they're really expensive.
Yeah, yes, they are.
I hear they cost a couple dollars.
Yeah, so it's like, but I do this for a living, so I've got my base products that I make, that I wholesale out. I've got my, retail stuff that I sell off my Facebook page, and that's what I do. So I don't want to do this forever. I'm hoping that somebody comes up in the ranks and wants to be the next Vin Russo, but I haven't met anybody yet. We'll see. Hopefully there's a kid out there that wants to get into this, and we'll keep my Noah's Ark going. But my greatest fear is that my Noah's Ark sinks one day, and there's nobody else to carry the torch, so to speak. So,
I mean, what you do is very unique. What you're working with is very unique. And like you said, coming uppers, I don't know if there's anybody that really stands out to me. Like, I'm trying to think of that boa guy kind of coming up that has all this stuff, or that's his drive. And again, we're a very ball python fixated hobby, and we always kind of get there. We're always kind of there. So I don't know who that new guy is either, bud. I hope he comes up. Are you told to have another kid? How's everything working down there? You still, could you make a baby?
What?
You know what I'm saying? A person. Could you make a person?
Make a clone of myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the technology is actually probably almost there. I'm just saying, you better figure this out, buddy. Like, you need to get out there and find somebody and start talking to them. Maybe a paper delivery boy. Do people still deliver papers in New York City?
No.
Ah, shit.
No,
I'm not really that ass, man. You should probably ask somebody else.
Well, we need young people getting into this hobby for sure. And I don't know if I probably mentioned it once before with you guys, but Eugene Bissett, I remember him talking about he hasn't yet met the next Vin Russo, and that was a compliment to me. But he did get a kid to work for him, Steve Tillis, who I thought was the next Vin Russo. But he took it one step further. That kid's getting his PhD in herpetology on some ball python disorders. So, there's some young people out there, but not as many as I'd like to see.
Yeah, there are, but again, it's a recycling hobby. Most people don't stick it out. It's ever changing. It's tough, and like you said, to actually figure out what your passion is and stick with it, and not let other things around you influence you to go in other directions is very difficult.
Right.
So no, it's kind of all over, but I don't know, guys. Was that our peak? I felt like that might have been a good peak right there.
I think it was getting there.
You can keep going. If you got some more Ben questions, we can keep rolling. Just Ryan was drawing blanks a second ago, and I don't want to force conversations.
Go ahead, Ryan. You were about to say.
I was about. Oh, see. All right, so we're going to close it out now.
I saw your mouth moving. I did. The only thing that I would say is that we should close out with a little, maybe a good old
sing along.
attaboy for Tom Burke. So
yeah. Well, how about this, Vin? I would love to hear about one of the lunkers that you and Tom caught on one of your fishing trips over the years.
Yeah.
Well, there weren't too many lunkers.
Okay, I want to hear your best fish story. You can make it up. Just really elaborate. I want your hands off the screen, buddy. We're never going to know if you're lying.
Well, one of the trips I went out on, not with Tom, with some other guys, they ended up getting a really large thresher shark. It was so big they couldn't get it on the boat. And I remember one guy trying to tie it up to the side of the boat and bring it back, and another guy arguing with him, like, just let it go. We're not doing anything with this thing anyway,
Yeah.
Growing up on the East Coast here in New York, the fishing here is really good. So there's lots of stories, but there's a reptile forum. So
No, you're good. Well, and too, when it comes to Tom, I know there's some great video footage out there, and if anybody goes out looking for it, you're gonna find it. Dave Palumbo did a video not that long ago, a few years back in his facility. They looked at some really wonderful animals that he had. So if you get out there and start looking around, I think everyone should do a little homework and kind of do a little history lesson on Tom Burke if you got time, because I think you're going to see some really cool stuff if you do.
Yeah, I mean, and Tom's definitely left behind a legacy as far as what he's created, because a lot of people have his animals now, so it's like it'll live on forever. That's for sure. I've got pictures in my book of a bunch of his stuff too. So, there he is as a cowboy.
Yeah.
He's just a fun guy, man. He's always smiling and laughing and having fun, even if he didn't feel good. And so.
Yeah. Well, it's a great hobby with a lot of great people and, a lot of interesting people too. So, like I said, it's a tragedy. We all hated the news when we heard it this week, but, again, like we said, the legacy going in the breeders that he left behind, the people he got into the hobby, everyone who ever bought their first animal from him and got that rush to buy a second one. So, there's always gonna be something there. And, we always get afraid people are going to get forgotten, but if we keep talking about them, keep remembering what they did, we can keep that legacy going for a while.
And Tom was a cool guy in that he gave everybody his phone number, and they could talk to him anytime. He would talk to people in the middle of the night, which Tom's a better person than I, because I don't give my phone number out to anybody. I mean, Dave's got my phone number, but
it took 15 years, but I got it.
But my point is this: Tom was a unique guy. He didn't mind getting on the phone with people that didn't know what they were talking about and talking to them about snakes and helping them out. And he's a better man than I for doing that. I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't do that. I talked to plenty of people on the phone too, but he went above and beyond. He definitely created a sense of camaraderie amongst the people around him, and shared his ideas. And again, I wouldn't be the breeder I am today if it wasn't for Tom Burke. That's for sure. 100%, hands down.
Again, honestly, Russo, anytime you can come on here, it's always a pleasure. You reaching out and saying you want to do a second one really meant a lot to all of us.
Yep.
And honestly, I'm glad we didn't rush into it, because, I think this was the right episode to do with you. So, like always, we really appreciate you coming on and doing this with us.
No, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. But let's see, Ryan, let's hear that beautiful voice sound us out, man.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on again. Like we said, we appreciate it. You are a wealth of knowledge. Sorry for showing up late again.
You missed the whole beginning.
I know. I'm so lost this whole episode. I'm like, I don't know what's going on.
You're going to have to watch it now.
I am. I will. Trust me. While I'm reading your book that I just bought while we were filming.
Love it.
So make sure you guys share this. Hit the like button. Subscribe. Go check out Vin Russo's stuff. Go show some support for Tom. And see you next time.
Sounds good.
Peace out.